Okay, we'll call to order the November 16, 2016 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Height. Present. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Here.
Commissioner Poland.
Here.
Commissioner Schernick.
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flake. Here. Commissioner Bruneau.
Here.
Great. The next item is communications from Principal Planner Don Burchett.
Chairman. Sorry about that. Chairman Chernak, members of the Commission, just wanted to let you know that there are some additional handouts at your dais tonight related to the second public hearing item for the firehouse storage. There is a revised PZR as well as some additional information that staff will be talking about tonight. We also have the airport manager here tonight who could also answer questions if the Planning Commission has specific questions about the information. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Don. Next item is public invited to be heard. This is a public hearing, so if there's anybody in the audience who would like to speak on something that's not on tonight's agenda, nobody signed up, but if anybody is feeling the urge right now to jump up and speak to the Commission, please come forward. We'd love to hear from you. Seeing no one jumping up, we'll close the public invited to be heard. Next is approval of our October 26 minutes. Is there any discussion? Anybody who is present at the meeting wish to make a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner Height, move to approve. Okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Poland. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved unanimously. And we'll move on to item 6, which is Cinnamon Park Senior Apartments Preliminary PUD Development Plan Amendment and Modification Requests with Senior Planner Karen Bryant. Take it away, Karen.
Thank you, Chairman Chernak. Karen Bryant, Planning and Development Services. So the application before you is for the Cinnamon Park Senior Apartments Preliminary PUD Development Plan Amendment. There was an original site plan for the property approved in 1989. The original site plan was for a senior apartment complex that included 3 buildings and associated infrastructure and amenities. This application is an amendment to the approved 1989 plan. The application was submitted to the City in February of 2016. The Development Review Committee has completed 4 reviews of this application and is recommending conditional approval of the preliminary PUD development plan amendment. A neighborhood meeting was held on September 30th, 2015, and the concerns raised by those in attendance were surrounding drainage, parking, and traffic. Notice and property postings occurred as required by the City of Longmont Land Development Code. There is a separate replat that is being processed to combine the 3 lots that this project covers into one, and that review and approval is at the staff level. So property location, it is located at 133, 135, and 137 Cinnamon Street. The entire site is approximately 2 acres. The redevelopment area is about 1 acre. Envision Longmont designation is mixed neighborhood, and it is zoned planned unit development residential. The additional building that's being added is a 24-unit addition to the existing complex. There are currently 2 buildings on site, each with 24 apartments each. So the PU development plan, again, the original one was approved in 1989. The 2 white, light-colored buildings and the parking lot, as well as the landscaping on the left side of the picture up there, that's what was constructed as part of the 1989 plan. The darker building that's a little larger on the right side in the landscaping is what this preliminary PUD development plan amendment is looking at. The reason we're doing the preliminary PUD development plan amendment is has to do with the time lag between the original 1989 site plan approval as well as changes to codes and standards. Also, because this particular project is infill development and due to the original 1989 site plan approval, the applicant has requested some modifications from the existing standards to both landscaping and parking. The modifications have been approved by staff, and these modifications are allowed as part of the PUD development approval process. As I mentioned before, the Development Review Committee has reviewed this project 4 times in total. There's more detail of that review in the staff report. This is just a quick overview, but I can answer any questions you might have. So the first identified concern was drainage. There is existing drainage issues in the neighborhood itself, and the existing on-site drainage facilities that were proposed in 1989 are not adequate for the additional new development. The preliminary design has been approved, and staff believes the remaining issues can be addressed as part of the final approval. Claudia Vaughn with Public Works is present if the Planning Commission has any questions or concerns regarding the drainage issues. Parking. The existing parking on site does not meet the current minimum parking standards for apartments, and there is no additional parking being proposed. The applicant has requested a modification, and they did provide an alternative parking plan that has been reviewed and approved by staff as well. Phil Greenwald, transportation planner, is here to answer any questions you might have regarding the alternative parking plan and approval of that parking plan. The last identified concern was regarding landscaping. Again, because of the prior approval, it's really hard to meet the number and type of plantings that are required on site. The overall open space that's being provided exceeds the required amount. The required amount is 30%. What's on site is 36%. Where we're running into issues is the number and type of plantings. Specifically, they have more deciduous trees than they should. They don't have enough evergreen trees. But the landscaping that's there is mature, it's in good quality, and staff didn't feel it was appropriate to move out the mature to meet those specific percentages. The modification request, we have reviewed it and conditionally approved it. As part of the final approval, we are asking for an additional 6 shrubs to be planted along Cinnamon Street between the street and the parking to kind of buffer the parking a little more. So the review criteria, there's more detail of this in the staff report, and I can review it if the commission would like. But the application does comply with the common review criteria for all applications in section 1502.040 of the Land Development Code. The application complies with the additional review criteria for PUD development plan applications in 1502.050 F4, with the exception of the landscaping and the parking, which I addressed as part of that I've already addressed. The commission options are to approve the preliminary PUD development plan amendment, finding that the review criteria have been met as reflected in PZR 2016-25A, approve the preliminary PUD development plan amendment with conditions as reflected in PZR 2016-25B, deny the preliminary PUD development plan amendment, finding the review criteria have not been met as reflected in PZR 2016-25C. Staff is recommending approval of PZR 2016-25B, which recommends approval of the preliminary PUD development plan and amendment with the following condition: all outstanding issues identified by the DRC be addressed prior to approval of the final PUD development plan amendment application. And as I said, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, and I also have Claudia Vaughn with Public Works and Phil Greenwald.
Commissioner Flake, go ahead.
I'm wondering if someone can explain what changes had to be made to the drainage and why that was necessary?
I'm going to turn that question over to Claudia.
We are not making any changes to the drainage. We are going to be releasing at historic rates from the detention pond. There's some issues in the alley that some neighbors have expressed concern that this development was not going to make those issues worse as part of this, but through our review of the drainage plan and the release rates from the pond, that this development is not going to have a negative impact on the site.
So as I just following up then, does that mean that the additional hardscaping from the roof runoff and all of that is accomplished with the curb and gutter arrangements and whatever you have in place already, and it's not going to exceed that?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pollan.
Bill, can you do a quick explanation for the parking and what you guys are recommending for a resolution to that issue?
Sure. Good evening. Commissioner Shernick, or Chairman Shernick, the rest of the commission. My name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planner with the City of Longmont. We had the same concerns, staff had the same concerns as the citizens out in this neighborhood regarding parking. And we weren't sure where to actually kind of place this land use as far as parking goes. There's not really a set parking rate or ratio for this level of land use. What we do have is we have apartments, so multifamily. We also have affordable, and we also have age-restricted parking rates. So we're trying to fit it in those. And what it really came down to is more of a group home type situation. So it was really about doing more of the, there's not many folks that drive to this place currently. And what we asked the applicant to do with that concern was to show us that. And that was their argument all along, was we don't really have the parking rates that you typically see for multifamily or for even age-restricted units. And so we had them go out, take pictures at different times of day. We went out there as well and checked it out, and saw that sure enough the parking lot's never more than half full typically. And then even with workers that come to work on the site, that's about as much parking as you'll see on the site. There is a space reserved for the van that does transport residents occasionally for different types of trips, but we were very comfortable then once we went through their parking study, and as you see in the packet, there's quite a bit done for parking on this. So we were, and there's a parking study that I don't believe is included in your packet as well, but was part of our packet. And so when we were reviewing this during the review process, so again, their expected residence age is more from 75 to 85, as opposed to the kind of more active living independent senior communities targeted at 55 to 70. So with that, we were starting to see that really isn't a lot of auto usage, and there's not a lot of guest visits either to this, unfortunately. But that's kind of the way this works out.
Commissioner Bruno.
Yeah, I just want to kind of revisit that drainage issue real quick. When you said that there was some feedback about that, I'm just kind of wondering what amount of feedback we're talking about. Is it just, one or two residents, or is it sort of a particular block?
Commissioner Shernick, Commissioners, it was an issue that came up at the neighborhood meeting, and then once the notice of application went out for this project, we did receive calls from two separate residents in the area. They came in with pictures. We did set up a meeting because it seemed to be a widespread issue in the neighborhood, so we worked with Public Works to kind of sit down and talk to them about the concerns. One of the main things, and Claudia, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when they were reviewing this project for drainage, they wanted to make sure that the new building, the new development on the site was not going to compound the already existing problem in the area.
Just to follow up, so right now there's actually not any plan to alter the drainage situation in that area with or without this new development. There's basically no plan to update anything or anything like that, correct?
There's no current plan, and we didn't feel that this development was the reason for this issue, that the alley maintenance program or another city program should take a look at this issue and try to fix it through that, but that if they were going to release from their pond at historic rates, which currently they're doing off their site, that they would not be exaggerating the issue or making it any worse.
Okay, so it sounds like the issue is something that is being recognized and maybe being addressed as part of this, but that this actual addition of this building, no one feels like this is really going to, aggravate that situation, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Karen at this time? Commissioner Height?
Thank you. Senior Planner Bryant, just to be formal. In looking at the 1989 PUD plat, which I realize is 28 years old, the design of the structures look like they're somewhat similar, and I know this isn't on our review criterion, but it looks like new building 3 is kind of vastly different, has a much larger footprint. And I noted that someone had identified that the open space component of this project exceeds the 30% required. In the 89, though, PUD approval, was there a larger open space requirement or contemplation? Because, again, new building 3 doesn't look like building 1 and 2 at all.
Part of the original 1989, the criteria that was looked at that time really didn't have a limit for open space and how much needed to be provided on site. Staff did discuss with the applicant, and it was brought up through the DRC review approval, that the third building did look different than the existing 2 on site. So the applicant is using similar architectural details. I mean, the scale of the third building is larger, but the materials that are being used to build it and the architectural details that are in the third building are consistent with the 2 buildings that are already on site. The change in the building design had a lot to do with a change in that layout and the design of what the senior housing options group wanted to use for these particular apartments. For this group, they wanted to change the layout, change the design. The existing 2 buildings on site are set up a little differently. There aren't kitchens in the apartments. They have a common kitchen, so they're really just using it. This third building, they wanted to really make the apartments more independent living with kitchens and bathrooms, so that required a little additional space, hence the larger building and the different design aesthetic. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Wright?
Karen, just follow up on that. Do you know in the original PUD, what the number of units they thought they would put into building 3?
The number of units remain the same.
Oh, okay. All right, great, thank you. Commissioner Height.
It raised another follow-on for you, Mr. Greenwald, which was that, am I projecting with my microphone? I guess I am. Phil, you had identified that you looked at this as more like a group home, which I guess now is buildings 1 and 2 were explained to me kind of are more like a group home. But does building 3's different characteristic as being more apartment-like at all? Was that what you considered in your parking plan approval?
Commissioners and Commissioner Height, we looked at it based on what we were given as far as the generalities of what the buildings had been previously. So we really looked at it as that whole group of apartments. So we incorporated this 24 units in with the others. But again, we're not seeing that this is going to be much different than the the other units. So that's how we looked at it for parking.
Even though they are explained and identified as being a bit more individual apartment-like as opposed to group home-like. There's individual kitchens, there's individual bathrooms, which I guess makes me suppose that the other buildings had something different, and that maybe this has a higher use intensity.
Because we have the existing group care at 24 units, and then we have a couple two-bedroom units as well, 4 units that made up kind of more of an independent living piece that's in the middle. And so this one was to be similar to the 24 that were existing on the end. So it's supposed to be kind of an end cap piece. And so we're going by what we know of the current populations of what's there. But that being said, again, this is, as far as the population goes, we're seeing that same age range, maybe some more independence, but also easily hitting that parking requirement piece where we talk about 30 to 31 existing parking spaces for the whole site, and that was originally planned for having 3 buildings on site. We reevaluated it with what we had, the information that we had, and it's our total combined requirement now would be 26, and we're just not seeing that that's going to exceed the parking that's out there today with the 31 parking spaces that are out there.
There are 31 there now too. That was unclear as well.
I've got 2 different numbers, so I apologize for that, but I have one that was done with the parking study that I was discussing earlier. So I have a 30 number, but also in other reports I see that they have 30 plus 1 for a loading zone. So that's there as well. And then they talk about the 1 space always being taken for the van as well. So again, based on the trip generation rates that we're seeing at this site, I understand that there's going to be some more independence here, but I think we're still comfortable with the idea that this level of parking is really what's needed out there, and it should satisfy those requirements. Mm-hmm.
Karen, do we have a presentation from the applicant tonight?
Commissioner Schernick, yes, we do.
Okay, shall we move on to that? Please start with stating your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Kim Hussey, and do you want my home address or my work address? Which one?
Work address is fine.
Okay, 1510 17th Street, Denver.
Okay, great, thank you.
And this is Liz Wolfert.
My name's Liz Wolfert, and I represent SB Clark Companies, and we're financial advisor for Senior Housing Options. My work address is 999 18th Street, Denver, Colorado, 80202.
So we want to thank you for allowing us to present this evening. My name is Kim Hussey. Again, I am the Director of Accounting with Senior Housing Options. And I think to address Commissioner Height's question about the kind of the population that we're envisioning serving, the 2 existing buildings that are there are assisted livings. So those rooms don't have kitchens. They're kind of like a bedroom with room for a chair. We have a kitchen that serves meals, 3 meals a day for our residents. And what we're finding in serving this senior population is that rather than having people in assisted livings, that they're trying to let people age in place. So our design is to allow people to live independently, to have kitchens. We are going to provide van service once a week to the grocery store. So if they don't have a vehicle, I think one of the staff had mentioned that we're looking to serve the older independent seniors that maybe aren't driving anymore, but we will provide van service so they can go to the grocery store. They'll be part of our group activities and stuff at the other properties so that they will be able to live in their apartment homes and receive services there, but still be part of our larger Cinnamon Park community. So we're very excited about that and think that it's kind of the way we're going to age in place here in the next decade or so.
I think that's correct. And just to add to what Kim is saying, senior housing options serves really vulnerable seniors all over the metro area, and Cinnamon Park's been around since the early 90s. But it really reflects the new property that's being, the new building that's being developed on site is really shows a shift in philosophy, moving, as Kim was saying, moving away from assisted living to more of an assisted independent housing. So the folks that are going to live there are going to be on really moderate fixed incomes. We're talking 30 to 50% of the AMI, and with the ability to receive optional service package that is already provided by the assisted living folks. So it's a great project, and just to address the approvals that we're seeking tonight, I mean, I think we appreciate how thoughtful staff has been in order to sort of separate the two phases of approval, because we're looking to go forward with a low-income housing tax credit application in 2017, and having an approval in place with the variances that are being presented here will allow us to present very strongly in an extremely competitive environment for affordable housing financing. So. And it's a unique project, and it is a little hard to describe because it's not assisted living, it's not congregate care, it's independent, but it's for very vulnerable people, and it involves a certain package of services. But I think Senior Housing Options is the expert in their population and have worked really closely with staff and with their design team and engineering team to make sure that it's an appropriate design, appropriate level of parking, et cetera. So we feel pretty good about it. Can we answer any questions for you while we're up here?
Any questions for the applicants at this time? We don't see any right now, so I'll move on to the next phase of this meeting, which is our public hearing part of this application. So do we have anybody signed up? Nobody signed up to speak, but if there's somebody in the audience who would like to come forward and speak about this project, please come on up. We'd love to hear from you. I see a little bit of movement, but maybe not. Okay. So we will close the public hearing section of this item, and we will go to discussion amongst the commission. Any comments, thoughts, motion, questions? Commissioner Height.
Karen, I have one more question. What are we being asked to approve? The preliminary PUD modification, but I see two modification requests with respect to, I think, for lack of a better term, shrubbery, and to the parking issues. Are those being processed? Are we being asked to approve those staff recommendations? Are those staff approvals? What exactly are you seeking of us?
Commissioner Hyde, what staff is asking for the commission to approve is the preliminary PUD development plan amendment with the modifications. So,
Not being processed as variances, modifications?
Correct, they are modifications. There is and I can give you the code section if you'd like, within the PUD development plan processing that allows for modifications as part of the approval. And just a second, I'll find it.
Nothing like having a room full of people watch you turn pages, right?
I apologize.
No, it's fine.
Chairman Chernak, members of the commission. So as Karen explained, under the PUD zoning district, we have the ability to grant modifications through a PUD because, again, PUDs are meant to provide flexibility to our standards based on some other additional design component or some other element of the project that we see as warranting reduction in a standard. And so underneath the zoning itself, there are two sections actually that pertain to granting of what we would normally consider a variance, but what we're calling tonight modifications. So in the section 15.03.060, capital letter capital letter E, number 13, we have design standards. It says all PUDs shall establish and provide design standards as part of the preliminary and final PUD development plan application. At a minimum, the design standards shall address building architecture, including design, materials, and colors, signs, including design, materials, and colors, lighting, landscaping, and other amenities and pedestrian and bicycle access. In addition, all PUDs shall comply with the applicable residential and non-residential design standards stated in section 15.05.110 residential design standards and section 15.05.120 non-residential design standards of this development code. And the decision-making body may not modify these standards unless adequate compensating design and mitigation measures are included in the PUD development plan. And then the second is number 17, and that's under that same section, talks about all other zoning and development standards and modifications. Modifications allowed unless otherwise expressly limited by the section, the decision-making body, and in this case that's the Planning and Zoning Commission, may allow modifications to all other applicable zoning district, general development, and subdivision standards within a PUD district, provided that adequate compensating design and mitigation measures are included in the PUD development plan. So the standard compared to the normal variance criteria that we've seen in the last couple months is not the same level, the same bar. It's not whether it was self-imposed, whether there's an alternative means. The question is whether or not the request they're asking for and what they have offered as an offset to that modification of the standard, you believe creates a good project. I mean, that's probably the best way to state it. And so if you believe that this project has met that criteria, then you would be able to grant that modification to any of these standards that we've talked about tonight, and specifically the ones that Karen has mentioned in her presentation.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. Okay. Commissioner Pullen.
Okay, I'll throw in my 2 cents then. The three main concerns were drainage, parking, and the landscaping. Claudia explained the issue with the drainage. I'm satisfied with the explanation that this addition will not cause any additional issues with the drainage from what they can tell. I appreciate Phil for giving us the information for the parking, and I do agree based on my experience and with my parents and my in-laws, that demographic does tend to not drive much, and so I'm very satisfied with that. And as far as the existing landscape, given the fact that this is a very mature landscaping already there, I do agree with what they've reached as a conclusion for that. Also, since this is affordable housing for seniors, something that's much in need in this city, given all those considerations, I will at this time be in favor for this approval.
Okay. Other comments? Commissioner Goldberg?
For all of the reasons echoed by my fellow commissioner, I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and move to recommend this application for the reasons that Commissioner Pullen said. We've addressed the three key issues, and the project is serving a need in our town without too much, without rippling the water too much. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and recommend PZR 2016-25B, which is approval as long as all the outstanding Development Review Committee issues have been addressed.
And by recommend, you mean a motion to approve?
I'm going to motion to approve.
Yes,
Sorry, I'm
okay.
sorry, I apologize.
And do we have a second on that?
I second.
Seconded by Commissioner Flagg. My comments, my thoughts are that the project inherently is the offset to the issues with parking, drainage, and landscape. I mean, just the nature of the project is innovative and something we need in the area for, as the applicant pointed out, a very vulnerable population. So that, in my mind, is enough to completely offset the other issues. Any other further discussion? Let's take a vote. Okay, that passes 7-0, which is unanimous. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, November 17 at 8 a.m., ends Wednesday, November 23rd at 5 p.m. Thank you very much to the applicants for coming tonight and sharing with us your project. Thank you, Karen, for leading us through that. We'll see you later tonight on the third item down. But next up, let me get back to my agenda.
I think I can find yours.
Next is Firehouse Business Park Preliminary Subdivision Plat and Conditional Use Site Plan with Senior Planner Ava Parachevsky.
All right, sorry.
It's not the first name that's hard. It's the
I'm
last
getting
name.
closer.
It's saying it can't find it. Wait, it's saying it can't find it. It's saying it can't find it.
Shifts. I'm going to get it. Shifts.
Technical difficulties. Get to watch me flip pages, now you get to watch me figure out a computer.
It's fine. I will. I don't know what happened, so I'll. I thought, okay. Just point of loading it up, so I don't have to have a flash. Okay. Okay. Hold on. I can't see. Good evening, Chair Shernick and Commissioners. Ava Pahijevsky, Planning and Development Services. This next item is the Firehouse Business Park Preliminary Plat and Conditional Use Site Plan. I've got a couple slides. I'm going to just sort of walk you through the nuts and bolts of the property, what's being asked for, and then the applicant's representative is here as well to do a PowerPoint, and then if you have any questions afterward, we'll be happy to answer. So we'll start with location. This is at the 43-acre property at the roughly southeast corner of Rogers and Airport Road. It was annexed into the city in 1999. It's bisected by Rogers Road here. Sorry, I can't see very well, but on the north is an 8-acre piece, and then the remainder is here south of the Rogers Road right-of-way. It's been historically used for agricultural activities. So the property is zoned BLI. I'm going to try and move back in a minute. It is on the comp plan as two different designations. I'm going to switch back here. The property on the north of Rogers Road here is zoned Parks Greenway and designated Parks Greenway and open space. And then the lower portion is mixed use employment. So we recently did the Envision Longmont plan. As you know, some of our zoning hasn't caught up with redesignations of land use, but it is currently all zoned BLI. So self-storage is conditionally permitted in the BLI zone, so they're here with a conditional use application. And the property under development is on the south side of Rogers Road. So apologies for this map. I'm going to try and break it down for you. So the first request is a preliminary plat. They want to do 8 lots. The first lot here is about 16 acres, and this is also the property they're asking to do the conditional use site plan on. Lots 2 and 3 are over here. Lots 2 and 3, about 3 acres each, I think it's on here. And then 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are here. Lot 5 is going to be a drainage outlot, so there would be no development there. I apologize, I hope you can see the lines, but there is a 300-foot wide navigation easement here that goes here, and as you can see, the development is sort of southwest of that navigation easement. The street layout, again, this curvature road here is Rogers Road. And on the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan, we have a designated collector street that comes off of Rogers Road here, and then it goes east, kind of goes at a diagonal here, and then it will turn straight east as you go to these other properties to the east. And so that's it in a nutshell. When it was annexed, there was a concept plan that was brought with this. There was a note on there that says at final plat there has to be a 100-foot wide emergency landing easement on this parcel north, or these properties that would be north of Rogers Road, and so we have conditioned that in your resolution. This is the conditional use site plan for the 16 acres. This would be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 would be on the east. This is north over here. This is Rogers Road. And down here is Airport Road, so that would be on the west. It's just easier to lay it out this way than to flip it. So they're going to start on the east and build about 100,000 square feet and then do another 100,000 square feet in phase 2 after that's completed. There would be a 70-foot landscape buffer here along Airport Road, and then the remainder of the property line boundaries would have a 30-foot wide landscape buffer. These are self-storage units. They're all 1 story. However, the end caps would be 2 stories, and I'll show you the elevations next. As well, there will be an office here off Rogers Road, and there's a little entry here. And this would be a 2-story building, be just short of 34 feet in height. And again, these are 1-story self-storage units, but the end caps will be about just shy of 31 feet in height. And there will be a fire truck display pad here at the corner of Rogers and Airport, as well as, I think, one here by the office. These are the building elevations. Again, this is the main office here off of Rogers Road, and that would be just short of 34 feet. And that would be to the very peak. That's at the top of up here. And then over here are the outward-facing storage unit building facades. These are the ones that you would see along the Airport Road frontage, the Rogers Road frontage, and also the east and southern property lines. This would be the backs of the buildings. That's what you would see there. Again, to the top of the cornices here would be 31 feet, but they're all mainly 1 story. And then these are the interior storage building facades. These are facing on the inside of the property that you would not really see from the street frontage. So some of the development issues that came up during DRC, again, we talked about this briefly, but on the street layout, when this project first came in, we had the old comprehensive plan. We had a collector street that kind of ran north and south on the eastern edge. That was changed, and that north-south collector was pushed to some other properties to the east. And so they realigned their street layout to comply with the new Envision Longmont project, comprehensive plan. In terms of traffic, we had a traffic study done. Our traffic engineers reviewed it. They concurred that the existing street network that we have here can accommodate this project without any additional mitigation. So as you saw in the aerial, this property sits kitty corner from Vance Brand Airport. Again, there's a 300-foot wide navigation easement on the plat that you saw in the preliminary plat. Again, on the concept plan and the annexation, we have conditioned that a 100-foot wide emergency landing easement be placed on the property that's north of Rogers Road. The FAA completed an aeronautical study of this project. They concluded, and that was in your packet, that there were no substantial adverse impacts. An appeal was filed yesterday by the airport manager, David Slater, and he is here tonight to answer any questions. So we're awaiting some response from the FAA on that appeal. Meanwhile, we've added a condition, which is on the dais tonight, because that was just done yesterday. We just had to do that tonight. It wasn't in your packets. And lastly, so we didn't get a species and habitat report with this as we had requested, so we're conditioning that the applicant do submit one so that we can confirm that there are no endangered species on the property. And lastly, condition that they finish up the remaining comments from the DRC. So in sum, we're recommending conditional approval. This project would meet the review criteria if these 5 conditions are met. And again, I just laid them out for you, but that they would produce the species and habitat report, work with the DRC to finish all your last-minute plan corrections on the site plan. When they submit final plat, they need to show the emergency landing easement. Regarding the red-tailed hawk, we just had some restrictions on construction. Those are typical standard conditions that we put on projects. And lastly, again, this is from this last-minute appeal that came in yesterday. We're just saying if the FAA changes their position and comes back and says, well, that project, the additional 3 feet that's over what's allowed is a substantial impact, then the applicant would have to submit revised building elevations to be in compliance with that. And with that, we have Barbara Brunk from Resource Conservation Partners here to also talk about the project some more in detail, go over the review criteria, and then we're also, of course, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Let's roll right into the applicant's presentation, please.
Chairman Chernick and members of the board, I'm Barb Brunk. I'm landscape architect with Resource Conservation Partners. With me this evening are the Burton family, Don Burton and Chris Burton and Chris's wife Barbie, who are the family that is going to own and operate this business, our engineer Todd Borger, and our architect Rick Morton. So we're here as a group to answer any questions. This is a interesting project, and I'm going to go quickly through some of the things Ava already did. Again, we're here to ask for preliminary plat approval and a conditional use site plan. Site location, again, Rogers Road. It's the north half of the old Schlegel farm and part of the Schlegel-Williams annexation. Again, agricultural use. Here's the airport, farms around the outside. This is the comp plan, and so the comp plan shows Envision Longmont shows the mixed employment here, and this little piece on Rogers Road is the piece that is designated as parks and open space. And again, the applicant has been working with the Parks Department to for the possibility of having a dog park on that property. That's how it got changed to green through the comp plan process. That's not completed yet, but we are in discussion with them, and the applicant is willing to work with the city on as that moves forward. We've shown it as lots, just in case that doesn't happen. So that's why you'll see it as a lot. This will happen in phases. Again, Rogers Road. This is that 300-foot clear zone. This is the collector that's going to head to the east, going south. Phase 1 here, Phase 2 here, and then the rest of the site will develop in phases as users come along under the BLI zoning. Preliminary plat for those lots. I think we've laid it out so it meets the criteria. The lots are all developable. The larger lot for the self-storage is here, and then developable pieces for other uses are here. This site has some pretty significant constraints between the airport and the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District and the public service pipeline. So it's a creative process to get it to be developable, and we think that we've done that and split up the lots so that they can share the cost and the burden of those infrastructure improvements, and that we don't leave behind something that is undevelopable. Again, this is a multimodal transportation plan. So there is a arterial bike path along airport. We have on-street walks along the road here at Rogers, also sidewalks here on this collector and these local streets. And then this connects over into Likens Gulch. It both goes under Likens Gulch and heads west over to Amgen, and then it goes back into the system and heads this way up through Golden Pond. So there's a really good vehicular and pedestrian and bicycle connection to the greater system in the city, which is why this is a pretty good location for some kind of recreation use because of its location and proximity to those things. This is my thing, the preliminary landscape plan. There are a lot of trees and shrubs required on this site because the whole perimeter gets buffered. There are street trees on all the streets. There's a detention pond landscaping, and then the additional buffering that's required as part of the conditional use around here. Again, there's 70 feet here. There's a 50-foot public service easement there, so we can use it for grass. And but they don't want any trees. So you will see as we move forward that all of the trees are cinched up against the architecture because we can't plant things on top of those pipelines. This is our conditional use site plan. Again, developed in 2 phases. This is how it fits into the context. So these are the self-storage units, and the detention pond will be here, and then these are future lots. This is phase 1 of the self-storage, and the thing that I wanted to show you here is, so this is the access, and even though this portion is going to be built later, this edge along the edge of the units is built with that same outside treatment. So the wall and the units and the architectural treatment, as you look across from Airport Road, even in phase 1 will be treated that way. Because we're going to have units here, what we've done with phase 1 is install the landscape buffer out along Airport Road. So the landscaping will be there, but the building facade at the back will meet that standard with the irregular shaped fenestration and the different kinds of materials. This is the caretaker's residence and office. Again, these applicants are passionate about first responders and their firefighters and their collection of fire trucks and those kinds of things. So it's very much a firehouse theme that you'll see on the site, and this in the tradition of an old firehouse, which we have up in Longmont. So you can kind of know that we have that basic feeling of the bricks. I have a materials board here for you as well. And then this is the caretaker's residence. Again, first floor office, second floor caretakers, and the private yard and the parking, all those things that are required as part of a self-storage office and caretaker's residence are included in that site, which is at the corner. This is that edge. So our architect has done a very careful job to make this look like a building instead of a wall. So there's difference in it moves back and forth along the frontage, it moves up and down along the frontage, and the materials change. So there's a color elevation of it here, and then this is the different elevations throughout the rest of the project. Interior buildings are metal buildings, but we're not going to see them from the outside because of the combination of the architectural element around the perimeter and the extensive landscaping and the landscape buffers. Again, this is that final landscape plan. So you can see that even though we have that wider setback here, this is the arterial landscaping. This is the perimeter buffer that goes all the way around. And all of those trees and shrubs are fit into that area. Access off of Rogers Road, and this is the residence. And again, that first phase edge runs right along here. These are the cross sections. So as you're up on Airport Road, you'll have the arterial landscaping. Then you'll have, this is that 50-foot public service easement, and then you'll have the buffer that sits up against the architectural element that defines the edge, and then the interior buildings. This is the Rogers Road section. Again, Rogers Road has kind of an irregular right-of-way because of the curve, and so there's a pretty big setback there. So there's streetscaping along Rogers Road, and then there's also landscape buffering here. And then this is along the back of the building. So at the property edge, it goes drainage, landscaping, build outside of the building. This is just a little bigger detail of the caretaker's residence and office. This is the private yard, and the parking spaces in the end of the first storage unit there. This is just numbers. Okay, airport. There's been a lot of conversation about the airport and if it's safe to build this project here. So this is the airport influence zone. This is the letter from the FAA that we had until yesterday thought that we had complied with the information as requested, and they said there was no problem. I talked to the airport manager. There's some discrepancy between what's okay and what's not okay and what's unallowed encroachment. And the appeal is based on there's a surface that you go over 1 foot and up, over 40 foot and up 1 foot. And there's 3 feet of one of these buildings that encroaches into that surface. And so it's the airport's position that that makes it not optimum, and so they've asked the FAA to look at it again. In that vein, though, this property has a long history of being cooperative with the airport. There are 3 actually avigation easements. This one right here, that green area, was given in 1958 as a clear zone at the end of the runway. When the property was annexed in 1999, the condition was that a 100-foot additional crash. Uh-oh. What happened? I said the C word. How did that happen? Okay. So the blue area is that 100-foot area that was requested at the time of annexation. So it actually runs from Rogers Road on the diagonal to the south over to the property line. And then in 2012, an additional 300-foot wide clear zone was established, and that's this piece here. And I have a bigger picture of that. Okay, so again, this is the 1958 easement, which really is right off the end of the runway. And if you look at the airport at the high level, that's where that is. This is that 300-foot wide piece that shows up on the ALTA survey that comes right to here. And then this is the additional 100 feet. And you will see that when we designed this, we laid it out so that the detention pond is in that area, and the road actually parallels that. So hopefully if a pilot's in trouble, they can land on the street, and there's a place that's unobstructed. But this area is not developed. It's a clear area that will be safe for the as required as part of the annexation. So those are the parts of the avigation easement and the protections for the airport that are included in this plan. And again, this is the firehouse storage unit location. Again, this is just a little more of that detail. So these are the ones that are in place, and the additional one will come right through here off the end. And you'll see on the site plans that 300-foot wide swath kind of we extended to show where it would be. And the road is there, the drainage is there, part of these other lots are there, and at the time they develop, I think they'll also have to go through that FAA determination to make sure that they're underneath the Part 77 area when they go through site plan review at the staff level. Wildlife. This has been a farm, irrigated and cultivated for many, many years. And so the only habitat that is even potential on the site is this piece of the Niwot ditch. And it's fragmented, it's disconnected from the other habitat, it is not connected to the creek and Likens Gulch. So we're pretty confident that except for the hawk's nest, we're doing okay, but we will have a biologist go and look at the Niwot ditch as Ava required before we move forward. The detention pond is on this side, and you can see this is where the outfall will be from the detention. So again, long-term irrigated, cultivated farmland that doesn't leave a lot of space for wildlife behind, except for birds that you'll see in the Division of Wildlife's recommendation. With that, we believe we meet the criteria both the common review criteria that say we are consistent with the comprehensive plan, that we comply with the applicable standards and codes. No exceptions are requested as part of this application. We meet the design standards and the landscaping standards and the transportation standards and the traffic standards. In addition, we've looked at the surrounding properties and given specific attention to the architecture and the perimeter buffering and the architectural treatment to make sure that no matter what happens around us, we'll be complemented and be in character with it. Multimodal transportation plan demonstrates how we're connected from a transportation point of view. This will not make it so the adjacent properties can't be integrated in the city. On the contrary, we've added transportation components that will connect this site through the site to the east, through the properties that are developing, into the south, Nelson Road. There's infrastructure in place. There's some specific standards for self-storage, things like 32-foot wide aisles, and that's a fire safety issue. We comply with that. There's some specific things about the caretaker's residence having a private yard and a parking space. That is included in the plan. The one thing that we wanted to talk about is the hours are typically 7 to 10 in the code. This is a self-secured facility, so there's a key card access. And so the way the other facility that they have operates is a 24/7 operation. So business hours would be the regular business hours and would fit into that time frame, but they would like for people to be able to access the site at odd hours through the secure system that's provided on the site. So that's the only thing that's a little different here, but I think the code allows you to allow us to do that based on the buffering, the screening, and the way we laid out the site. Again, perimeter of the site is well screened, and we have the appropriate buffer. And then I just have to brag a little about these guys. They are absolutely committed to the first responder community, and I don't know if you've seen their facility up in Loveland, but they collect fire trucks that are out of service, so you'll see them on the edges. We have a place to display some of them here. They have some very cool antique fire things that they incorporate. This is a plaque to the first responders that were at 9/11 that's on the facility. This is the kind of security that they have, and it's a family business. Part of the family is here, and this is the rest of the team. And with that, we're here to answer your questions, and I'll sit down and be quiet. We request you approve our applications as we can move forward, conditioned as the staff has conditioned them.
Great, thank you, Ms. Brunk. I think rather than rolling into questions, we'll go right into the public hearing part of this and just gather information right away from anybody who wishes to speak. We do have 2 people signed up to speak, so if they're still here, if you come forward to the dais, we'll give you 5 minutes on the clock. You get a green light. 1 minute left to go, you get a yellow light, and then at the red light, I will kindly ask you to stop speaking. First signed up on our list is Howard Morgan. If you'd come forward, give us your name and address for the record, and speak up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Howard Morgan. Address 1932 Amethyst Drive, Longmont. I've been a professional aviator for nearly 60 years, and I've been on the airport for 25. And I've just become aware of this project in the last few days, a week ago maybe. So I haven't had a whole lot of time to study it, but this project is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've seen in quite a while in aviation. I think there's a total lack of understanding of the aviation angle of this project. Boulder County loves their open space, and this would be a perfect chance to acquire some open space and move this facility away from the airport to one of the many other properties in the area. The navigation easement, which I've just become familiar with in the last few minutes, is a good idea and a bad idea. You got a road in the navigation easement, and that's not a good emergency landing area because there's cars on it and people on it. And when a problem happens, there's not enough time to call and say, get the cars off the road. So we've had an event just recently, an engine failure off the west end of the airport where the airplane was destroyed. The pilot was able to walk away without an injury because there wasn't any obstructions in the area. Had this, or if this were to happen to the east with this project there, it could be devastating for both the people in the airplane and people on the ground, because there's virtually no place to go when you have a problem at a very low altitude except straight ahead. So I would urge you to work with the company and find a more suitable area to build this where there would be no problem. I support it. Many other people would support it. But this is just not a good idea. You need to, in fact, if somebody wants to take a ride in an airplane, and I'll show them exactly what it looks like, and it ain't good. So please consider this and see if you can't find a better place and find a way to make this open space. I think it would be welcomed by anybody on the airport and anybody that visits the airport from somewhere else, which we have a considerable number of jets flying into the airport now, and not only is it a safety issue, it's a public safety issue, but it's also a noise issue in the case of airplanes flying over the facility at 100 feet or less, depending on the conditions. So it's just not a good deal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Next on the list is Bob Lehner.
Bob Lehner. Our home address is 1233 Wagon Wheel Court in Berthoud, and we have a business at the airport. I've been flying out of Longmont since '79. First, I think you do need to view it from the air. And as you leave the runway, you're going maybe 100 miles an hour to 140 miles an hour. That's what you're going to be going. That's the energy that's going to be dissipated if you do go down. In Boulder, little over 20 years ago, there was planned an apartment building complex off the west end, directly in line with the runway, and we put together 20 years of history of where aircraft either landed or impacted off the end of that runway for 20 years. And it predictably, it starts at the runway and it goes out and it goes in a turn for the traffic pattern. And it broadens as it goes out. And that prompted Boulder, which is not really very responsive, I must say, to swap that area with another area and put in a soccer field and move the complex, which is a hard building and gave us no choices if we had an engine out. And that was an improvement. We wouldn't want to land in the soccer field when it was occupied, but it was maybe a better choice, and during a lot of the year it isn't occupied. There are better planning that can be done here. You've got to visualize going across a field at 120 miles an hour and the control that you might have in a car. You have even less in an airplane because it starts to lose parts and deviate. A wing may dig in or whatever, and they go off to the side. And that's where you see this divergence going off. 100 feet is nothing. I encourage you, and I don't think there's any conflict, to go fly with somebody like Howie and view it from a takeoff and from a landing, you'll appreciate the rate you're going over the ground as you take off and visualize what your options are ahead. And as you land, you're going to be impressed with, at a normal landing speed, which is less than the takeoff speed, how narrow that runway looks when you land. It's a real living experience, and I hope you take it. And open space is a better choice. Buying the development rights is another choice, and I'm sure there are other choices that can be incorporated, and FAA may participate in those. FAA, incidentally, is very good about obstacles. In a good takeoff, you've got this clear area when everything is going well, but they don't really get into space for an emergency landing. They cover a normal takeoff and don't build above that, and ladders up, antennas are a risk, particularly for people coming in from out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lehner. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak at this time? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Ian Huss from 3110 19th Street in Boulder. I've lived or worked in Longmont for the last 40 years. I have rented, or I now own, 3 hangars at the Longmont Airport. I've been building and flying homemade airplanes out of that airport for 24 years now. And I go up several times a week. And I just became aware of the easements and all of that tonight. And this is terrifying from a pilot's point of view. I could have done what I do out of the Boulder Airport, but I decided the Longmont Airport was a lot safer place to do this sort of thing because it's got all these flat fields around it. And the thought of something happening and going into this development, I mean, it's not going to be pretty. So I'd just like to, I don't think I can say anything better than these guys have, but this is a terrifying option for me. If anything goes wrong, it's going to go very wrong with this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huss. Is there anybody else who'd like to come forward and speak? Seeing nobody else, we'll close the public hearing of this, and we'll return to the commission with questions and discussion. Commissioner Bruno.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious about the evolution of what I think is maybe the northern western part of this property, as it was originally designated open space. Is that correct?
Chair Shernick, Commissioner Burnett, I don't remember what it was before Envision Longmont, to be honest. I know that it is currently designated open space because we were reviewing this. Although it came in under the old comp plan, it was very short-lived. We moved toward transitioning to the new comp plan, and so I cannot tell you off the top of my head if it was open space before the Envision Longmont project or not, but it currently is now, which limits its developability. And all that land north of Rogers Road, obviously, again, although it's zoned BLI, again, the zoning hasn't caught up with our new comprehensive plan. We're going to be doing some zoning map changes soon. So I presume that that is one property, or those 2 lots, I guess. It looks like one property, but it's platted as 2 lots on their plan. Those would have a different type of zoning, I would presume, because Parks Greenway open space is pretty limiting on development there.
I guess so right now it's open space, and what we're thinking is that it's going to be this BLI in the future, but is that what's...
No. So again, the whole big square was all zoned BLI. And it was industrial economic development on the land use map. So I'm gathering, I'm sorry, Don just pulled it up. Yes, so the old land use map had this whole entire square as, okay. You're just kind of right behind me. Anyway, yes, so it came in under the old comprehensive plan. The old comprehensive plan had the whole square as industrial economic development land use designation with business light industrial zoning. It was all compatible. The land use and the zoning were compatible. We changed that piece with Envision Longmont. And so I know that the applicant has been trying to work with the Parks Department for possible land dedication to the city, possibly for some open space use there in Dog Park.
Okay, so, man, I guess forgive me, I'm maybe not catching on to something here, but so it's currently open space. I guess during the presentation, it looked like they were talking about doing some developments there, or some dog park development or something, or am I totally wrong?
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood what your question was. So there is no development proposed tonight for that piece north of Rogers Road. They have to do a preliminary plat in order to get development started. And so they have shown you how they would like to carve it up. And since that piece north of Rogers is, again, not highly developable, that will probably, they're thinking turning it into some kind of park development, if you will, not really no buildings or structures, but so the project, I'm sorry, if you could just be respectful. And so this project is not in that Parks Greenway open space. It is in the mixed-use employment section, land use designation.
So any decisions we make this evening will basically have no impact on what happens with that chunk north of Rogers Road, correct?
Correct. There's no development application associated with it. The only thing you're looking at tonight is the subdivision plat to take that and look at it as a whole and how they plan on chunking up all the lots. Okay. Not a development, just a plat for that piece.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Pollan.
Ava, at the time of annexation, how was this planted, or how was this zoned originally when it was annexed? What were the initial concepts for this particular piece? Do we know?
Barb's got the concept plan.
I just page through my slides here and I'll get to the concept plan. I thought that might come up. This is a concept plan that was approved at the time the property was annexed. And it was all zoned business light industrial, and it is currently privately owned land that is being farmed. It is not open space. It is land that was annexed and zoned for development and was designated on the comprehensive plan for future development at the time it came in the city. So this piece, this is the part we're talking about tonight. This is the Williams piece. This is Rogers Road. This is that 100 feet that everyone's talking about here that goes this way through the property, the additional crash zone. This is the other piece of the property that was subdivided off. So this was the historic Schlegel farm, and this is the Williams farm. So at the time this property was annexed, it was anticipated that it would develop as business light industrial in the neighborhood here.
Okay.
Commissioner Flake.
I have a question regarding just a clarification on the subdivision of this square area here that we have on, I guess, on Ava, on your presentation. It's my understanding that the various lots or platted areas are designed in such a way to make sure they all have access to a public street so that they are all developable. And from what looks like to me is that the edge of, it flashed so fast, the edge of the required navigation easement is actually some amount of distance from the edge of the proposed self-storage area. Is that a correct statement? And what is that distance?
Yes, Chair Shernick and Commissioner Flake. So again, looking at this sideways, this is Airport Road, and this is Rogers here. This is north. This line here is the self-storage lot. I'm sorry, it's so hard to read here. Barb, do we have another one? Well, yeah, the 300-foot wide navigation easement, and is this about right, Barb? It's hard to see. It's not in this lot.
There's a highlighted one. There's one that has the overlay. It's a little easier to see. Sorry about flipping back and forth. Okay, so this is the self-storage lot. This is the 100-foot asked for as part of the annexation, and this distance, Todd, what's the depth of that lot? Do you know?
So the question that I have, I guess, is, so I see the blue shaded area. Then there's a space between the blue shaded area and what looks like a hash line that is on the same boundary as the orange square area. Okay? So even continuing that on, should that be part of what ends up as the navigation easement? And I'm not clear it is or is not. There is a distance between that hash line and the edge of the property under consideration for the self-storage unit development, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what is that distance there between where the orange hashtag is and
This line here and this corner here?
No.
This line here.
That line there and
this
the
corner
shaded
here.
area, what is the distance there?
About 200 feet, because this is 100 feet, about 150 feet. See, this is a 300-foot wide, and if you took half of that and put it here, so it's somewhere in that 150-foot range.
Okay. And the green part, what does that have to do with?
That is the first navigation easement that was granted on this property in 1958.
And
so that's an existing, platted, dedicated easement.
Okay, and that all the lines and all of the shaded areas all go through an area that right now is not under consideration for development.
That's correct.
As a part of our consideration this evening.
Except as part of the preliminary plat.
You're right, it's part of the preliminary plat, but it's not part of our consideration in terms of an actual developable space. Thank you.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Ava, I have a couple questions about Mr. Slater's letter. Do you want to field the questions, or should we ask Mr. Slater to come up?
Commissioner Goldberg, Mr. Slater is here tonight to answer questions about that letter because I am not an expert on flying. So take it away, David.
Good evening, Commissioner Shernick, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is David Slater. I'm the airport manager for the City of Longmont's Vance Brand Airport.
Thanks. Mr. Slater, I have a couple questions about this. Would you rather just explain your letter a little bit more to those of us who aren't aviation experts, or do you want me to just start shooting questions at you?
Your preference, sir. Whatever's easier to answer the questions that you have.
Cool. I'm challenged here because we have what I'm going to call the governing body. We have the FAA saying, no, this project's okay. And we have a room full of, I suspect, your customers saying, this is the worst idea we've ever seen. And I respect all of these people. And so there's a couple, you mentioned the penetration of the 40-to-1 departure surface, and then this FAR Part 77 penetration as well. Could you just school us a little bit on those two criteria and how they play a role in this decision today?
Yes, sir. So the FAR Part 77 is a regulation that deals with navigable airspace and imaginary surfaces around airports. In this particular instance, we're talking about the departure surface, which begins at the end of the runway, the width of the object-free area, and it goes out at designated distances in accordance with the advisory circular that's put out by the Federal Aviation Administration. So the 40 to 1 departure surface typically pertains to instrument departures. So and what I was dealing with was directly associated with the airspace determination that was, or the initial determination presented by the FAA. But you can look at that, and based off of their overall analysis is where they come up with no hazard to air navigation. However, my job is also in part to read the whole determination and find out how they came to that conclusion. The issue that I had is that the FAA holds airports and aviators accountable to regulations that they come up with. But from our perspective, when the FAA comes in and says, you have to design your airport this way, you have to meet this criteria, you have to meet this standard. At that point, as an airport operator, from our perspective, I take issue with that they're giving themselves an exception and not holding themselves to the same standards that they're requiring us to meet. So part of my job to mitigate the liability and risk is to point out the fact that, and you'll notice in my letter some of the reasons that I gave that I believe that their information was not complete, was that some of their information on the numbers of departures for instrument flight may be skewed. There are times, and you can ask any of these guys here, there are times that people will come in on instrument flight plan, but they'll cancel their flight plan prior to arrival. And at that point, that number doesn't always show up in the FAA's number of instrument operations. Same thing with an instrument departure. Whether it's a single engine piston aircraft or a jet aircraft, when you do an instrument departure, there are times that they will take off and pick up their clearance after they take off. So the operation from the airport may not show up in their numbers. And so that's why I believe that their information is skewed on the total numbers of operations that have been conducted. Now, from my perspective, if it's a single instrument departure, it's a significant impact. So from my perspective, and the reason I responded to the FAA the way that I did was from the perspective of you do have penetration of your Part 77 surface, so I disagree that there's no significant impact.
I'm sorry, what did the FAA report as the projected number of instrument takeoff and landings, and then maybe what do you think the reality might be?
I did not pull those numbers. I do not know without doing some research, sir, as far as actual numbers. But I can tell you that it is a common occurrence in certain conditions that people may have an instrument flight plan, and then when they get within range of the airport, that they cancel that flight plan.
Great.
Prior to their arrival. It is a common practice.
Okay. Did you touch on what a FAR or FAR Part 77 penetration is? Did you clarify what that was?
With specific reference to the letter that I wrote and what we're discussing tonight, it references that 40 to 1 departure surface.
Okay.
So the FAA takes into consideration that when an aircraft is taking off and departing the runway, at the end of the runway going out and up at a 40 to 1, out 40 feet, up 1 feet, that area should be protected and should not be penetrated by things that are not fixed by function. And what I mean by that, there may be certain waivers when you have navigation aids, but typically they're not going to penetrate those surfaces anyway. On rare occasion, at very few airports in the nation does that happen. But other than that, you don't want to have penetrations of that. It also could pertain to your approach surfaces. You have an approach path that comes in at a 34 to 1 ratio. Now, when you're measuring that and taking that in consideration, you're actually starting 200 feet prior to the runway end and going out and up at that 34 to 1 ratio. Now, you have an inner approach surface within that optimally you want the airport to be in complete control of that. Unfortunately, in this case, we don't own the land and we don't control it. But ultimately, that's what we'd like to see, is out to those distances to have control of that property, so that you don't have construction and buildings and trees and things like that. Now, you can have vehicle service roads, things that are pertinent to airport operations. That's the ultimate and optimal desire for one-way protection zones, or RPZs.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Pullen.
Mr. Slater, one other question then. Just to clarify, so is your concern the two-story building that they're going to be putting for the residents, or do you have a concern about there being a development in that area, period, as we've heard from Mr. Martin, Mr. Linger? Or don't you want to just, or you don't want to comment on the second? Are you just mainly, is your mainly worry based on your letter to the FAA about the two-story building?
So as far as the letter to the FAA, I had to address the things that come under the purview of my job, as far as making sure that we don't have penetrations of the surfaces that they don't want us penetrating.
Okay.
So we want to hold everybody to the same standard. So that is my main concern with the letter. I think that you do have a lot of valid concerns that were presented to you tonight. But, you know, if you're asking me my professional opinion on that, that's what it is.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to jump in with a couple follow-ups. So some of the public speakers, the gentleman here tonight, said that basically, for lack of a better term, the crash zone, if I could use that phrase, seems to broaden as you go further out, and they also indicated that it could also turn. Do you have an idea as to how many flights, when they're taking off in this particular direction, would go toward the north versus how many would go to the south? What I'm looking at is that flights that would tend to turn toward the south would perhaps be more likely to crash over the storage unit.
So if I can caveat my first statement, before I make the statement, I want to caveat it. I cannot speak for Mr. Liner. I think that
Sure.
I can take a guess at what he was referencing, and he can definitely come up here and kick me if I'm mistaken. But basically what he's telling you is there are several factors when you take off and then have an engine failure that you have to consider. And it's a very quick process at the lower altitudes. So the rule of thumb is anything below 500 feet, you pitch for best glide and go straight ahead. Well, if you have a building straight ahead, then you need to alter your course. The problem with that is that when you start making turns and banks, when you increase the bank angle of the aircraft, your stall speed of the aircraft increases as well. Okay? So as you're coming down into a glide, if you start banking to avoid a structure or a building, you also have to pitch your nose down even further to increase your airspeed to accommodate for the difference when the stall speed goes up. So you may be in a turn as you're going down. As you're going out, I believe when he starts referencing the turn, there are a couple of things that he may have been referencing, and I don't want to speak for you, Bob, but I think that at the impact point, for instance, if you have a wing low, it may dig in, and then it scatters, and then you have a different debris field that goes out and impacts more than just the area of impact. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that he was referencing, as you go out and you turn, that's because the aircraft may not lose that engine initially, and there are other considerations when you're in a turn for the actual traffic pattern. So there are several locations around the airport within the given traffic pattern. That's another thing that is a consideration. And I don't know if that's what he was speaking about. I think the first part of that covered it.
Okay. So, Mr. Slater, you also mentioned that there are more jets taking off from our airport. So, given their speed and their power, how does how do they tend to respond in these sorts of situations?
As far as a engine failure on departure,
Right.
it depends on several factors. I mean, it would have to be a specific scenario before I could give you my opinion, but I think there are better people qualified to answer that question as far as operation of jet aircraft.
Okay.
But I do believe that the things that you're going to be concerned about is if they're on an instrument departure or not, or if they're on VFR. But the fact that they're a jet aircraft, you got more metal, you got more inertia from the velocity because they have higher takeoff speeds. And so when you're in that situation, there may be more concern of what's going to happen on impact versus a smaller, lighter aircraft. But I think either one is just as bad.
Okay. And then finally, so with the diagram we have up with the green, the orange, and the blue boxes showing the easements, if people are at risk from airplanes crashing at a certain frequency or at a higher frequency, then why didn't we make these easements bigger? I mean, why are the easements basically narrowing down when what I seem to hear is that the risk gets broader as you go further away from the
Commissioner Shernick, that would be just a best guess on my part.
Okay.
As you heard earlier, most of these easements were done beginning back in the 50s all the way up into the 80s. I've been here for a year and a half, so I can't speak to it as one of the decisions were made to design the easements that way.
So
I couldn't answer that question, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay. Fair enough. Commissioner Height.
Thank you. More questions. I think I appreciate the difficulty of the letter that you had to write to the FAA trying to, I guess, identify the standards to which you think you're held to should also apply to neighboring developers. The issue I don't understand is whether or not there is actually a penetration of the airspace that would occur with this development.
Commissioner,
of the limited or the regulated airspace.
Commissioner Shernick, Commissioner Height. So in reading the determination itself from the FAA, there was a section that talked about the penetration of the 40-to-1 departure surface. They just felt that there weren't enough of those types of operations to cause a significant impact, and that's where I disagreed.
So indeed, this project, as laid out, had a penetration into that space.
That's correct.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm sorry, Ava. It's a 3-foot penetration?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is anybody here qualified to tell me what the hell that means? Yeah, I mean, in terms of whether or not it's appropriate for a building to have a 3-foot penetration into this inviolate space. I mean, you've written a letter to the FAA. Ava said it's 3 feet. Between here and there, I don't feel qualified to be able to make a decision on what a 3-foot penetration into the FAA space means.
I completely.
Can you tell me? Can somebody else tell me?
Yes, sir. I believe I can answer that accurately. I completely understand your quandary in trying to make a determination of, well, it's just 3 feet or it's just a small penetration. Ultimately, those determinations are made by the FAA. It is their jurisdiction. It is their airspace. So they're going to have to be the ones to ultimately make that decision. Out of due diligence in performing my job, when I see a penetration of the navigable airspace, it's incumbent upon me to make sure that I protect the city's interest and the lives of the people operating there, that I point that out and say that, well, I respectfully disagree. I'm petitioning you and requesting that you re-review this analysis. Now, they can come back and do one of two things. They can say, thank you for your input. We disagree with you and still believe that it's no significant impact. At that point, I've done my job. Whether we agree or not, each agency has done its job. Or they can come back and say, thank you for your comments. I agree with you. then it would be a conversation between the FAA and the person who filed the request for the study. As far as the direction that the FAA gives, they may do another condition within that study and request that they lower it. I can't speak to what the FAA would tell them to do, but ultimately it's the FAA's decision as to making the determination on their airspace.
Okay. I have one more question. I'm addressing it to you, but I'm kind of addressing it to some of your customers, as Josh referred to them, which is that I heard you say you want to control that space, you want to control that property. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's private property. These people have given easements, a series of different easements, restricting the rights that they have to develop. They're giving away that bundle of rights. To control that space, you know, as somebody said, maybe you have to buy their development rights, but no one's proposing to buy development rights, and nobody's offering up money to buy their development rights. They have a right to develop, do they not, within the airspace? I mean, within 200 feet of your runway, even though, as long as they don't penetrate the airspace, as I understand what the rule is, yeah, it would be nice that it were all farm fields, but it's not always all going to be farm fields for forever. I mean, it's not, you didn't build an airport with the guarantee that it's always going to be a farm field around it. Isn't that correct? That's a stupid question, but I answered it by asking it.
So to answer and respond to the first part of that, you're absolutely right. Ideally, that would be the way to do it, is to control it. And when I say that, the best way to do that is to actually own the property. The other forms or the things that you're looking at are avigation easements. Those are, which at least ensures those approach and departure surfaces will be protected. And quite honestly, I don't want to speak for my predecessor, but I think that he has the same issue that I have as far as budget. If we could afford to buy that property, I think that the airport probably would have bought it a long time ago.
I'll interject that the runway would get bigger and the planes would be bigger, and then the guys further to the south and west would have. I'll stop.
Commissioner Flagg. Thank you, Mr.
I
Slade.
have some more questions. Please stay there.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell me, how much of the site is actually affected by this penetration? It's a vertical height issue?
That's correct, ma'am.
And you talk about the FAR Part 77 surface. And what area does that actually cover?
Okay, so that covers an area starting approximately 500 feet wide at the runway end and going outward and upward at an angle to where I believe there's some, when you get to the, I want to say it's 10,500 feet downrange, for lack of a better term. The distance that it goes out to is 6,500 feet wide.
Okay, but it
And
does.
so it goes out at that angle, but it goes from the end of the runway, starting at 500 feet, outward and upward in a 3D trapezoidal shape at a 40-to-1 departure surface. So for every 40 feet that you go out, it goes up 1 foot.
Okay, it's
And
real
then
gradual.
typically the sides actually go out even further than that at a 7-to-1.
So, and how far from Airport Road is the end of the runway?
Google Earth.
I guesstimate's fine, I'm just.
Here, there you go.
So, right, can I blow up? Or is this, can you zoom it? Okay. So, right about here is 200 feet. Well, okay, so right about here is the 200-foot mark. So I'm guessing that that's another 600 feet or so. So probably the airport road, the edge of that's probably some 800 and something feet, just a best guess,
Okay.
from the end of the runway.
And you talked about in your letter the instrument departures versus non-instrument departures. And can you clarify to me which ones are most affected? I know you said in your letter, but tell me in language that isn't technical.
So the letter was referencing the 40-to-1 departure, which are the most impact is from that surface is based off of instrument departures.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if it's just a visual departure, that's not something that the FAA really takes into consideration. But on the instrument departures, they do.
So is it fair to say, and you can tell me if I'm incorrect, it's all right, a non-instrument departure is eyeballing it?
For lack of better description, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Mr. Slater, has there ever been a crash in Longmont's history in this area, east of airport, south of Rogers?
I am relying on my customers because they've been here a lot longer than I have. On that end, in that area, I believe there have been two, sir.
Ava, can you speak any more to when there were incidents in this area? Okay.
I can tell you that the, sorry, the speaker's off. I can tell you, that there's a 3-foot penetration, which is what precipitated this FAA letter, and that relates to that 2-story office caretaker building. And that's why staff made the additional condition with the applicant's cooperation that should the FAA come back and reverse their decision based on the airport manager's appeal, that wouldn't hold up the project, that they would just resubmit a lowered building by 3 feet.
Commissioner Flake.
I can speak to the accident that happened because I witnessed it. And it was an incoming flight. I don't remember if it's 2 or 3 years ago. There had been 2 planes that collided in airspace to the east of Longmont. One plane headed toward the airport. It didn't quite make it. And there's kind of an open area between the edge of the fence and the edge of the road that has no vegetation on it, and that's where it came down.
Other comments, questions? Oh, Commissioner Goldberg, you're back up.
Mr. Slater, the few times I've had the luxury of flying out of your airport, I've always taken off towards the west. Is taking off heading east a common route?
I would say that it is. It just depends on the wind direction. I've seen days that the takeoff, the traffic has changed which direction you take off multiple times in a single day.
I just wanted to touch on one thing. You did mention that the easements were dated back to 1956 or so, but it does seem like, at least the information we have before us, shows that those easements have been updated as recently as 2012. And so I look forward to the rest of the discussion from the Commission. What I'm just having trouble with is the room full of pilots who have, boots on the ground experience, have airtime, and I respect them very much. We have the organization, as Mr. Slater said, whose responsibility in the end it falls on, saying that this project is not a hazard. And we have a project before us that has respected the 300-foot easement and the extension of the, what I think you called the crash strip. So I just look forward to hearing the rest of the discussion from the Commission about how the rest of you guys feel about this.
Commissioner Paul.
Ava, In the letter from the Airport Advisory Board, they have made a recommendation that the caretaker's house be moved outside of the runway protection zone.
Can you folks in the back speak or whisper quietly, because you're disturbing what we're talking about up here, please?
Let me repeat that. The Airport Advisory Board has recommended that the caretaker's residence office be moved outside of the runway protection zone. I don't see, and maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see a designation for a runway protection zone. Is that the red? So basically, it is already outside of the protection.
That's correct. Sorry, my mic is not.
Oh. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That's correct. So the gray box is the development project. So perhaps there might have been some misunderstanding when we initially sent the referral over to the board, thinking that this development was in the RPZ.
So the runway protection zone is between the red dashed lines, correct? No.
So, Commissioner Shernick, it doesn't really show up in this exhibit. It is very similar to what you see in that green color. It's not exact, but it's close to what you see in that green color shading as far as the inner approach of the RPZ, the runway protection zone. That's correct.
And so the runway protection zone would actually go south of Rogers Road then?
Did it? I'm sorry, what was the question, sir?
So it actually goes south of Rogers Road? It actually crosses over the gray?
So
area?
not the RPZ, the inner portion of the RPZ, which is designated as the RPZ, but you do have approach and departure surfaces that go beyond Rogers Road. But the RPZ itself, which that's the area designated that you really don't want anything underneath, if at all possible, other than surface roads. That is the area that is on the west, kind of northwest side of Rogers Road.
Okay. In your experience, and I don't expect you to be a statistician, but are there any sort of numbers or generalities about what's the frequency of when a plane crashes that it causes collateral damage, that it kills people who are on the ground, that it destroys other buildings?
I'm not sure how to answer that because, and respectfully, I don't mean this the wrong way, but that's a very broad question.
I know.
Are we talking about nationwide? Are we talking about Longmont Airport? Are we talking about?
Just, if all you can speak to is nationwide, I'd be curious what that is. If you actually know it for Boulder County, I'd be curious about that too.
So I really haven't done a lot of research on that, and I would be hesitant to try to put any numbers out there.
Okay.
But
I'm trying to get at like probabilities, like okay, we have a sense of what the probability of getting struck by lightning is. What's the probability of me getting killed by an airplane crashing?
I understand what you're getting at. So I guess the best way to answer your question is under a hypothetical scenario, there's less of a chance of having a crash in an airplane than there is in a car. However, when you're dealing, and I think that this is the point that we're trying to make when we talk about airport safety and things like that, and why those surfaces are to be protected. If you put a building right off the end of the runway and there is an incident, you have a significantly higher probability of that building being struck than if it were 1,000 foot out and 1,000 foot off to the side. Placement right at the end of the runway is going to significantly increase your chances of there being more damage or, heaven forbid, more fatalities.
Okay. Okay, thank you,
I'm
Mr.
not sure if that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, that's heading in the direction. Commissioner Pollan.
Barb Brunk, question for you.
Because Chris Burton is also a pilot and has flown in and out of Longmont Airport, so he has some personal experience. If you would like to ask him any questions, he'd be happy to talk to you.
My question is it appears that one of the main points of contention right now is the caretaker house because of its height. When you were coming up with this plan, was there any thought about, was there any thought about where you placed it, and could it be placed at an area other than where it's currently at? Because it seems to be, and the problem is, it seems to be right at if you project the runway out, it's in path of the runway coming out, and there's we're talking about a bigger piece of land here. Was there any thought, or is there any possibility, or have you considered moving that so that it's not kind of like sitting at the end of the runway when you project it out?
A couple of things. When we started off the project, we looked at the 41 departure, and if there was no fill on this site, that 3 feet would not be an issue. But because of the drainage and Rogers Road's elevation and Airport's Road elevation, there's some fill on the site that brings the site up a little bit and pushes that building up that 3 feet. So in the big picture, we did look at it from the start. Can the building be 3 feet shorter? Yes. The site design is kind of determined based on the phasing and controlled access to the site, and that's why the caretaker's residence is in that site. Could we redesign the whole site to make it work? Absolutely, but somebody asked us to go to the FAA and ask them if it was okay, and we did, and they said it was. And so we're pretty far down the road on a site design to start again. I would also say that if you are out there, I spent an hour on that site this morning with a camera because I heard all this conversation and I wanted to know what was going on. I saw three planes land, and I saw those same 3 planes. They must have been doing touch and goes because they all took off to the west. And they head right out west up to the foothills, make a circle, come back around, and then land. And where they were the lowest was on the north side of Rogers Road. But even then, they were pretty far up. They were pretty tall. I mean, from a standing there point of view, I heard the road noise on Airport Road over the noise of an airplane. I mean, I couldn't even hear the airplane engine. So that must be the landing quiet as opposed to the taking off noise. So I don't think noise is an issue. But could we redesign the site? Yes. But from a practical point of view and the way the site functions for the operation of this business, that site was location because of the site access. And the site access is determined based on the setback and the spacing between Rogers Road, where it hits Airport Road, and the collector that's going to head east-west. So there's a specific window that we can have that site in that helps determine where that access is. And the caretaker's residence and office is relative to the access point, so it's a controlled access on the site.
If I can just touch on Barb's comment. Sorry, can you push the button real quick? And just one other thing. So Airport Road is an arterial street, and the city doesn't allow access, period. Can't have driveway access. So the driveway access has to come off of Rogers Road. And if you've got your main entry point to your business coming off Rogers, it would only, make sense that they would want the office right there as you enter the property so that you go to the office to get some self-storage, I suppose.
Commissioner Height.
Changing gears, the wildlife assessment, Ava, do we process these without wildlife assessments? Typically?
Commissioner Height, no, we do not. And we had requested one at the pre-application. We got the application submittal. I know we had made a comment on it in our DRC comments that we didn't get it and we needed it. Barb responded back in writing, and which is what I had put in the staff report. She was fairly confident. No prairie dogs, no species. Nevertheless, for us to make the finding that this meets the review criteria for the project, we really need that, and that's why we added it as a condition of approval. And we also told the applicant, if that biology report comes back and does show that there are some species out there that are federally or state protected, you will have to come back to P&Z, and this is on your own, your decision for not bringing it up in the first place.
Ava, I have a follow-up question on that. So if I read the packet correctly, it appears that the distances and the times during which we are trying to avoid disturbing that nest are recommendations. But it also appeared that that any inhabitation of the site would most likely result in the hawks abandoning the nest. At least that's what I read, that in the description about how red-tailed hawks respond to human activity, that if there's human habitation of the land at any time of the year, that the red-tailed hawks are likely to abandon the nest. So it appears that if we were to approve this, that most likely, given our activity there, that we would see those birds move away. Now, there's no question in there. I'm just kind of pointing this out. But if you think that I've misread what was in the packet, please let me know. Any other comments, or if you want to reply to that, Eva?
I talked to Dan Wolford in the Public Works and Natural Resources this morning, and I was, again, out there with my camera and a telephoto lens looking for that hawk's nest this morning, and I could not find the nest. So I sent the photographs to Jim Crick and Dan Wolford and said, where's our hawk's nest? And what Dan told me is it probably blew down, okay, but the hawk, they come back to the same place every year, and they would, if that's a place they like, they may likely come back, and that they would monitor it. And they usually come in February or March. And if there's no hawk's nest in February or March, then we could begin construction, and then there probably wouldn't be a hawk's nest there. But if they nested after the construction happened, then it would recognize that activity was there and the hawk was okay with it. But it's a wait and see. Okay. Based on his direction that I talked to this morning, it's a wait and see thing. And if they're there, we have the window that we can't, and that's so that their nestlings have an opportunity.
Okay. Well, that's new information that wasn't in our packet, so thank you, Ms. Brunk. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Commissioner Flagg.
This project shows us that in certain places, certain developments simply cannot be. This could not be residential development. That would be straining credibility. But except for the one habitation on the site, to have a storage unit is probably the best possible. Of course, you could have a dump, but we might not like that. But I tend to support this because I know that larger airports such as DIA also have end-of-runway concerns. And one of the most used runways at DIA is an east-west runway where planes take off over where we all park our cars. So that's something to think about. I would tend to support this, and as such, I believe it's appropriate to make a motion that we approve this. If I can find the number, then I'll tell you what it is.
2016-24.
2016-24B.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to approve 2016-24B.
I second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Rodriguez. Further comments? Turn off your mic. Commissioner Height.
Yeah, I unfortunately think I'm not in favor of this. I'm just not in favor of this at this time. I don't think we know what a 3-foot penetration into this airspace means, if anything. And I also don't know that it's appropriate to approve this project without the wildlife assessment having been performed, which, was asked to perform. There was a visual reconnaissance done, but it doesn't suffice to meet the standard of why is that red hawk there, that red-tailed hawk there? Sure, it's been farmland, but farmland holds lots of wildlife. There's ditches running through there, so until those two things are answered, I think it's premature for us to be making a decision on this project. Even though otherwise, the project, I think, seems to otherwise work.
Oh, Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, this is challenging. We have a room full of people that know this better than we do, and nothing perked my ears up more than when Howard Morgan said this is a matter of public safety, and that sat me right up in my chair, and I started leaning forward a little bit more. I think that that's something that we all sit on this commission and are fearful of somehow enabling a project that compromises public safety. However, what we had before us was some concerns about the street layout, the traffic capacity, and those seem to be addressed. And that's left us with this proximity to the airport issue. The biggest things we've been talking about is the navigation easement, the emergency landing strip. And when we evaluate whether the applicant is meeting the burden here or not, we have to turn to those who are the experts. And we do that whether it's on traffic, we do it on whether it's on density, or in turn we do it with wildlife issues as well. So I think what we have here is the experts, in this case, which is the FAA, have moved and approved this project, or not raised any red flags about it. I recognize Mr. Slater has some concerns with whose feet are being held closer to the fire, but in the end, we have to use the information that is given to us and the data given to us. And in this case, the data says that this project is acceptable. To Commissioner Height's concern, the approval is on the condition. There's 5 conditions, and one of them is the what is someone help me with the right word? The wildlife impact assessment is approved, if you will. And so I feel comfortable moving forward with this on the condition that that is held up, and I rely on city staff to cancel the project if that wildlife assessment comes back negative or in opposition to the project. So with that said, I don't know if we are the experts relating to the 3 feet infringement on that particular plan. I think the FAA is, and they have spoken, so I don't feel like we need to hear too much more from them. So with that in mind, I'm in favor of Commissioner Flagg's motion.
Commissioner Bruno.
Yeah, not to drag us back to our original discussion I had earlier, but I also am so a little confused about that area north of Rogers Road. I see the big green box that nothing's going to happen in. The other little pie pieces around that, I mean, maybe you guys can kind of educate me. Are we going to see proposals for development in those areas? I mean, are we going to revisit that at another time, or those are basically open to development as far as I understand?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Eva, but there's discussion about turning that entire curved part north of Rogers Road into a dog park, which would be the development that would be there.
Chair Shernick, we don't know for sure right now as we're sitting here whether that will be a dog park exactly. All we know is that the land use designation was changed by City Council to Parks, Greenway, and Open Space, which limits the developability of the property. Whether it will be a park, a dog park, we don't know at this juncture, and that piece of land north of Rogers is not up for development application tonight. It's only a subdivision of the property that it relates to.
Okay. Does that help, Commissioner Bruno?
Yeah, just to clarify, we're talking about that entire chunk of land, not just the little green square. That has nothing to do with that other than the airport and the fly zone stuff, right? If that makes sense.
The green
box up there you're talking about, or?
Yeah, I'm just trying to confirm that the whole area is what.
That's an old easement from the 50s.
The green box.
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean anything?
It's a navigation easement. Again, it limits developability, which is likely why council made the policy decision to change that to Parks, Greenway, and open space. There's not much you can do when it's encumbered with so many easements.
Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Pollan.
And then I'll give my comments on this. Based on the conditions that have been set aside in PZR 2016-24B, I am satisfied, though a little bit conflicted, but satisfied that we and the city have taken the proper steps. There is the condition 1, which is for the wildlife, and also condition 4. The other condition, condition 5, which addresses should the FAA reverse its findings. When I look at this, and what is not before us is the ability to change the zoning for this. This has been zoned BLI, which means that there would be some kind of development there. And as I believe it was Commissioner Flake pointed out, this is probably about as light and as far as risk concerns for crashes, maybe about the best thing that you could actually probably put there as far as less risk for human life. Given that, and given the fact that there are conditions and that we are still waiting for the final approval for the FAA, and that we're waiting for the approval of the wildlife, and that if there is issues with the wildlife, that it would then come back to us to address, I am also in favor of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollan. Commissioner Bruneau.
Sorry. Just to kind of tell you guys where I'm at, I feel like I'm leaning toward an abstain on this one. I feel like some of this FAA, question coupled with the public's concerns about that, I feel I'm definitely not an expert in this, and obviously there are some local people that have, pretty significant concerns about this. To just basically leave it up to them at this point to change or not, I don't feel like I am fully knowledgeable enough about this. I mean, basically, I can say as a member of the commission that, well, the FAA is who I'm supposed to listen to, so, I just go with whatever they say. I kind of agree with Commissioner Haidt that it just seems a little hastily put together at this point to me. Again, I agree with him. I'm not in favor of it, but I don't feel qualified to give a yay or nay on it at this point.
Okay. I'll chime in with my own take on this, which might be a minority opinion. I agree with Commissioner Haidt. The lack of info is concerning. We do have the conditions in the PZR to try to correct that. But it's concerning that we're getting this taken in front of us, even though the city had requested multiple times to get a wildlife assessment done, and it was not done. So I am concerned about what kind of wildlife would be driven from the site. The safety issues are really where I'm having trouble, and I take the approach that those actually put us in a situation where we don't meet some of our review criteria, namely 1502.040.c and .d. Paragraph C states that the application is consistent ... with neighboring, existing, and approved developments in terms of land use, et cetera. Given the severity of the public safety issues, I would say that it's reasonable to say that this is not consistent with the land use. It's so unsafe, given the statements we've heard from the airport manager and from the public. It's not every day that you hear somebody say that this is terrifying. We've had people from the airport, complaining, speaking, talking to us when we've had proposals for housing nearby. And they're saying, look, if you build more housing, we're going to get more complaints, and we're going to, it's going to impinge on the economic viability of the airport. What we're hearing from the public tonight is you build this, and the likelihood, the probability of killing somebody, especially the pilot, is going to be much higher because they land in a field, they might walk away. They land and hit this, or they hit the curb, or they hit the car that's parked on the side of Rogers Road. They're not going to walk away. So you also don't hear the phrase, if it goes wrong, it goes very wrong. So that has me very concerned. Then also paragraph D, the application will not significantly adversely affect surrounding properties. Well, it actually, interestingly, adversely affects its own property. This is what's kind of an inherent problem that I realized as I was listening to the discussion about this. It's almost ironic that the applicants who are so passionate about first responders, which I really respect, and it's a really, really interesting proposal here, to have this whole approach about the firehouse and it all being about the first responders. But it's almost like by building your project here, you're going to create incidents where we need first responders to respond to these incidents, because there's going to be a crash there that involves loss of life, perhaps. So to me, that is, I just cannot in good conscience vote for this. But those are my 2 cents. Commissioner Flake.
Okay. One of the things that you have to understand is that this crash that I did witness happened over a residential area. Okay? The 2 planes collided into each other. One of them made it almost back to the airport. I don't recall that the other pilot lived. And they crashed. We live with risk. Airplanes fly over us all the time. I know that one of the places that these small planes fly over is my house on a fairly regular basis. And of course, I listen a little bit to see that the engine doesn't go ba-da-da and end, all right? Because I sure don't want it in my rooms. We live with risk. There is some risk in everything. We asked how many crashes have occurred at the end of that runway. Nobody can remember them. I remember them, and I don't even fly out of there. So, and I happen to be driving along Airport Road. I think that we have all of the criteria and the conditions that staff will follow. And I noticed that the number 1 condition is that the assessment for the Hawks comes back before us. And we have another chance to say no to this project. And I think that we need to move ahead on it. We do have another chance at it. To completely shut it down, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. They've done a lot of engineering work. They've done a lot of scoping out. The FAA has been appealed to. They have a chance to make a ruling. So I think we really need to go ahead with it and support it.
Commissioner Height.
Another question for you. If we deny this, are they off for 1 year?
Excuse me. Chairman Chernak, members of the commission. So there's actually 2 options. The first is that the project would be appealable to City Council. They would have the opportunity to request review by the City Council to determine whether or not there was some problem with the hearing tonight, and City Council could make a different decision if they could make a finding that there was a problem tonight. That goes for not only the applicant, but any other aggrieved party that would want to file an appeal tonight. The other item that you point to is the question about denial, and the way that the code reads is that it talks about that is a project that's substantially similar cannot come back for a year after a denial has been given by the city. The question would be, how would we define substantial? What would that look like? Is substantial being just another storage facility? Somebody could argue that. Somebody could argue that, well, if I redesign my storage facility to try to address some of the issues that were brought up tonight and move things further over to the south and a little bit more to maybe to the west to keep it further away from that, that's a substantial difference than what they presented. So that's one of the words that sometimes we look at in our regulations and have to make interpretations on. But that would be something that staff would look at, and I think we would also base it on the reasons for the denial. If the denial is because there was not a habitat and species report, and we have one, then I would say that's substantially different. If it is because you don't feel comfortable because you haven't gotten the appeal decision from the FAA, and we now have an appeal decision, and the decision is, you know what, our first decision stands, or not, and that they have to drop the building. If they come forward and say, we've either addressed it because it's not an issue, or we've lowered the building because it was an issue, I would say, again, you could argue that's substantial. But we would look back at the record to see what the items were that were denied to determine if they have tried to address those in a substantial way. So hopefully that gives you the two alternatives that could happen.
Dan Kramer.
Chair Shernick, Commissioner Hyde, I'm going to add a twist, if that's okay. What the code says is the denial of a development application by the PZ is final, and that same request or one substantially the same may not be considered by the city for a period of 1 year from the date of denial unless the PZ's denial is overturned by the City Council on appeal, or unless the PZ's denial explicitly states that an earlier reapplication will be considered.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And I just want to remind everybody that the motion that's on the floor right now is for PZR version B, which is a conditional approval. Okay, so the motion could pass or could fail given our vote. If the motion fails, then we have to continue with discussion and another motion that might be for approval or denial or another set of conditions until we come to a positive approval of either approval, condition, or deny, if that makes sense. All right? So if this vote fails, it does not mean that the project fails. Not at this point. It just means that the conditional approval failed. And I got a heads up from our attorney. Good. All right. Commissioner Paul.
I would like to get back to the one point about the way it is currently zoned, because I understand the concern about putting some kind of development at the end in that area. Unfortunately, the city has had two swings at this. One on the annexation, and at the time of the annexation, the city looked at it and says that can be business-like, basically. Two, at the time of Envision Longmont. Envision Longmont continued with the BLI for that area. So at two different points, the city, and I believe that would be also including the city council, has said that that area can be developed. For good or bad, that was a decision already made by the city council. Because of that, this is conditional, but conditional just means because of the type of building for BLI. It doesn't mean any kind of building. So because of that, and as I've already stated before, this is probably the least impactful kind of development that we could put there. The big concern is the caretaker's building. The FAA is re-looking at that, and they'll either give it a fly and say, yes, it's okay, or they'll say you have to lower it by 3 feet, which would meet any kind of FAA specifications. It may not be the best suit for that land, but I don't think it's in our purveyance to try to negate the zoning that's already been approved twice by the city council, or by the city.
I'll chime in. There are, as we know, there's a range of uses that are allowed in different zoning areas. And I disagree that we can make the claim that this is the least impactful way to develop this land. We don't know that for sure. Somebody could come in with a business concept that would develop this land that would not have row after row after row after row of buildings that become targets for crashing airplanes. It could be a business use that falls within BLI land use, which is even less impactful than a storage unit. So I don't think we can agree that we know that this is the least impactful use at this time, because it's not been studied. I can come up with other ideas. Okay, any further comments? Oh, I thought of another thing, just in response to Commissioner Flagg. Yes, past history shows there haven't been that many crashes here. There's not many people in the room who can remember them. You witnessed it, which is pretty amazing. Not many people remembered a flood like 2013, but the probability of that flood, it does happen. It can happen. Past performance is not a predictor of future occurrences. Commissioner Flagg.
And yet, we all live with risk. Driving down the road, as I was doing, was probably the more impactful thing for me to do than for the airplane to have crashed there. The point is that we all have a risk, and lots of things can happen to us. And we can't base our decisions on what-ifs either. Yes, there are unintended consequences, but these people have decided to develop a portion of land. They've put their money into it. They've put their time and effort into it. We know that we have a good planning staff in the city. They will follow up and make sure things are done, the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted. And I believe that we, to a certain extent, need to follow that process and see how that plays out. As I said, we have another shot at this, and we still shoot it down later.
Further comments? Commissioner Bruneau?
I just want to sort of echo what you had mentioned earlier about the sort of, like you were saying, this is not a sort of a life or death kind of thing that we're talking about. I'm still hung up on this idea of basically giving the FAA the last word no matter what. I mean, we have some people here who are fairly expert in this room who seem to think that they're not agreeing with the FAA's rules, and they may have a pretty good case. And if we just say yay to this and the FAA comes back and says, it's a go, I mean, they basically, I don't think, have much recourse at that point. And for that reason, I'm just not real comfortable with it, like you are. And if they weren't in the room and if it was just, the FAA says it's cool, I think I'd be pushing the yes button. But they have what sound to me like very legitimate concerns. And 2 crashes there, in memory of the people that can be here in the room is of a concern, and maybe makes me think that their points are more valid than maybe, some guy at a spreadsheet at the FAA. So I don't know if I'm being errant in my duties by not giving 100% respect to the FAA's final word on it, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Other comments? Well, first off, before we take a vote, I respect everybody's comments, and thank you for a vigorous discussion about this. Really appreciate that. Let's take a vote. Okay, it passes 4-3 with Commissioners Height, Schernick, and Bruneau casting no votes. Commissioner Bruneau, did you intend no or abstain?
I'm sorry, yeah, I did intend no after the further discussion after my comment.
Okay, so that is correct as a no vote. Okay, and so read the notice here. So just to be clear, we did approve the conditional approval of the project. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, November 17 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, November 23rd at 5 p.m. Thank you very much to the applicants for coming and spending your time with us this evening. Ava, thank you very much. We're going to take a 10-minute biology break. We'll be back at 9:40. variance with senior planner Karen Bryant. Karen.
So,
microphone.
actually, and I am thank you. Chairman Shernick, Commissioners, one thing I do want to clarify is it's actually modifications that we're asking the Planning and Zoning Commission to approve and not variances. And the modifications on this particular application, the ones for Cinnamon Park were at a level that staff could approve them. This modification is something that needs to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the application is for a preliminary plat, preliminary PUD development plan, and modifications. And the modification request is for the model adjacency and diversity requirements of Section 15-05-110. The application was submitted to the city in February of 2016. The Development Review Committee has completed 2 reviews of this application and did not identify any major issues or concerns, and are recommending approval with the conditions. Neighborhood meeting was held on September 21st, 2015. Questions and concerns from those in attendance were regarding the number, type, and designs of the home, as well as traffic. Notice and property posting occurred as required by the City of Longmont Land Development Code. So, property information. This is, the property is south of and adjacent to East 17th Avenue and west of East County Line Road. Property encompasses approximately 10 acres. Envision Longmont designation is mixed neighborhood, and the zoning is zoned, and it is zoned plan unit development mixed use. The proposed application is for 44 new single-family lots. This is a continuation of the Eastgate at Shadowgrass neighborhood, and the sixth filing as it is laid out is consistent with the earlier filings and the approved concept plan. So the PUD development plan, it includes 44 single-family residential lots, a pocket park that's a little over 1 acre in size, as well as all necessary roads, open space, and other infrastructure per city requirements. So review criteria, it's gone into in a little more detail in the staff report, but it does comply with the common review criteria for all applications. It also complies with the additional review criteria for PUD development plans. It complies with the application, the additional review criteria for PUD MU zoning districts. And it also complies with the additional review criteria for preliminary plat applications. So the modification request, and look, there's the code section I was looking for earlier. So section 15-03-060E13 of the Longmont Land Development Code allows for modification of standards if the design is part of the PUD development plan approval. The applicant, the modification is being requested from section 15-05-110F with regard to model adjacency and variation requirements. And the specific code requirements are that no more than 20% of a single model of home, regardless of elevation, be built in a subdivision, and that the same model, regardless of elevation, cannot be built adjacent to or across from each other. The modification that the applicant is requesting is that the same model with a different architectural elevation may be constructed on lots adjacent to or across from each other, subject to no single model will make up more than 40% of the lots within Eastgate 6th, and no single elevation will make up more than 20% of the lots within Eastgate 6th. The actual numbers of that would be no more than 17 of any one model could be built, and no more than 8 of an elevation. The intent of the standard is so that there is variation in the appearance of houses built in a subdivision as opposed to all of the houses looking alike. The variance in elevations provided serve the purpose of varying models in that the houses built will not all look alike and will have varying architectural details. The applicant has provided elevations that are significantly different in architectural details and styles, as well as utilizing a variety of materials. And the next 3 slides are just kind of some examples of that. All of these are in your, it's a little hard to see up here, and they are all in your packet, but like these are the 3 different elevations they're proposing for model 4112. And when we did check with both the building department as well as planning, and we feel there's enough of a variation between the elevations. This is again 4201. This is a 2-story. And then 4213. So staff is recommending approval of the modification request with the following conditions. And the reason we're adding these conditions is because when we asked building department to review this modification request, we realized that it was going to add additional work and review for the building department, so they asked for some additional submittal requirements be put on the building permits for this filing to aid in the enforcement of this. And then also because staff support of the modification request is because we've seen and approved the elevations, we're asking that the housing models be approved at this stage as opposed to at final development plan, and that any changes to those models or elevations have to come back for Planning Commission for approval. So specific conditions are that approval of this modification, the details be included in the notes on the final plat and PUD development plan, and that in addition to the percentages, the actual number limits be included. In addition to the standard building permit application submittal requirements, the applicant will also provide a lot map showing adjacent model and elevations and a chart outlining the number of each model and elevation already approved for all of 6th filing. And house models and elevations are approved as part of the preliminary PUD development plan and modification request, and changes must be approved by the Planning Commission. So the commission options, I can read through them, but it's basically approve with conditions, deny. And staff is recommending approval of PZR 2016-23B, which is basically conditional approval with the conditions that I mentioned earlier regarding the modification request. The applicant is here for a presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
Thank you, Karen. Commissioner Height?
Yeah, if I could.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Just a brief education because I'm still confused. When I look at attachment 9, I see 7 different models, 3 different elevations for those 7 different models. I get somewhere up to 40 different types of houses. Is that the right way to look at it? There's 7 different models, each with 3 different elevations, and the elevations are deemed to be different models by the building department or not? Are there just 9 models here or 40 models?
Commissioner Shernick, Commissioner Height, there are actually only 7 models. Each elevation is an elevation. What approval of this modification would allow is it would essentially create 40 different models, as you were mentioning. Part of the reason the modification has been requested is because when they're selling the properties and they're developing, what's happened in the remainder of the Eastgate filings is that the ranch homes are what seem to be that people want. So typically when we're running into elevations being requested to be put next to each other, where we've been running into the problem in other filings is with the ranch homes. One of the things that did occur as part of staff reviewing is a second model ranch home was included in the approved models to kind of help with that, but they're still asking for the modification.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
This question is based on the earlier filings. Do they exceed the model and elevation requirements that are being set forth tonight for the 6th filing?
Yes, they do. The previous 5 filings do have this this modification request. It was originally approved administratively to just allow the last few lots in filing, I believe it was 2, to be sold and approved. And it has carried through the other filing 3, 4, and 5. But it was never really formally, it was just something that was allowed. And so when staff was reviewing this application, it became apparent that if this modification was going to be allowed in 6th filing, it really needed to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. But it is consistent with the previous filings.
Thank you, Karen. Let's move forward with the applicant's presentation, if we could, please.
Full screen mode. Should be under view. Fit page. We'll go with that. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Todd Borger with TJB Consulting Group, address 11813 Pleasant View Ridge, Longmont, Colorado, 80514. I've lived and worked in the Longmont Boulder area since 1991. With me tonight is Mr. Dale Bruns with Eastgate Development, LLC. He's been with the project since roughly 2002. And he is also representing Cal Atlantic Homes, the home builder. Cal Atlantic used to be known as Ryland Homes in the area. They have built in the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th filings and wish to complete this filing as well. I'll keep this brief as I can at this late hour. We also want to express our thanks on behalf of Eastgate, my company, and Cal Atlantic to Senior Planner Karen Bryant and Planning Director Don Burchett. Over the years, they've been very helpful as we've had to work through a number of challenges, either market-driven or other-driven, as we went on this project. They've been helpful. Our summary to date is, again, not to have a detailed application. The staff write-up and presentation well represents the project intent and interests, and we're here tonight to move this forward and request approval on the preliminary development plan and plat, and specifically Resolution 2016-23B. Quick project overview as it's on the screen to the left. Again, this project started back in 2002. First filing was this grayed out area off to the left over here that the cursor is floating over. Construction started in 2005, which turned out not to be a great time for development as housing curtailed off with the economic downturn. With the downturn, things almost stopped for quite a while, and as the market was starting to have life, the buyers that were showing up expressed interest in a different style of development than what had been planned for the rest of Eastgate. So the rest of Eastgate, that's all in color here, turned into somewhat of a salvage operation, and in 2009, Eastgate Development processed both a conceptual site plan amendment, which is the document in its entirety on the left, at least the graphic map, excuse me, as well as an amendment to the overall preliminary development plan. So fast forwarding to today, getting to the question, why are we here? We're in part here because back in 2009,
the comprehensive site plan amendment left an option, and that option is this dark green color. The dark green shaded area that the cursor is over was laid in to either turn into a townhome development idea with 2-plexes, 3-plexes, or 4-plexes, or simply to do a single-family detached layout similar to the rest of the areas that are shown where the cursor is in. For reference, second filing was this zone right here. Third filing was this standalone cul-de-sac. Fifth filing is this zone here, all of which was built by Cal Atlantic, as it's known today. Fourth filing is this little strip here, and it's going to be built by another builder. And sixth filing is the final piece to the single-family detached residential puzzle to be completed only in 15 years or so. That is why we are here today. At that time in 2009, the preliminary development plan amendment did not select one of these two options and left it as a blank donut hole, essentially. Today is a detailing exercise, so we are detailing out the preliminary development plan. Cal Atlantic has chosen the single-family residential. On the right side of the map is the project as proposed. The shaded green area from the 2009 concept plan corresponds to the shaded green area of the current application, just for your reference. We're in support of the city's review on the development plan as is, and we can be available for questions to that end. Similarly with the PUD modification, we can go into much more detail as to why that's being requested, but Karen wonderfully summarized that this is the right time to put in place in front of you what has been in place in practice since second filing. So with that, we are available for questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Borger. Any questions for Karen or Commissioner Pollan?
So these are going to be similar to the houses that are currently in that area. Approximately, what's the price range of those houses? And I don't, and if it's ones that are currently there, just so I have an idea of the price range we're looking for here.
Well, not being part of the sales crew, I think Dale and I are thinking their starting prices are in the high 370s right now.
Commissioner Flake?
Please don't go away. Developer?
Mr. Borger? Oh, Karen?
To further answer Commissioner Pollan's question, with the exception of the very last ranch that you're seeing at the bottom, the remainder of the homes have already been approved as models to be built in the other filings.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Flake?
My question concerns lot number 44. By my calculation, it's the only lot that doesn't have on-street parking. Can you tell me why you couldn't figure out a way to have it have on-street or an extra parking space?
Excellent question. I don't know if it was part of the packet or not. It was a staff question in an earlier submittal of the project. So we did create a parking plan for all of 6 filing, which also resurrected the 2009 work that we did. There is some creativity allowed within a PUD, so while there is not an on-street parking space directly in front of the lot, it's right outside of the cul-de-sac to the south on the west side of the street is how that laid out. And I apologize, I didn't bring that graphic with me.
I actually saw that graphic in some of the stuff that was given, but we talked about unintended consequences. I would bet that those people living in the houses on that west side or east side of that street are going to think that those parking spaces are theirs.
Parking management's a challenge in a subdivision, I'll grant you that. But yeah, we believe we had met the standard of the parking spaces allowed within the creativity of a PUD.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Other questions? Comments? Okay, this is a public hearing item, and so we'll open up the public hearing section of this. Jane, do we have anybody signed up? Nobody signed up, but there's a gentleman who'd like to come forward and speak. Please give us your name and address. You'll get 5 minutes. I'll cut you off when the red light lights up, but I'll do it nicely.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name's Jack Boyers. I'm a resident of Shadowgrass subdivision. Fortunately, the house prices are over $400 now, and that's without a toilet in most cases. So they're going up in price every day. But with that said, I support this project as a resident at 1412 Blue Moon Drive. I think the east side of the project, the road is Armstrong. Is that correct? Okay. And Blue Moon's going to dead end into that area? Okay. Parking. They raised that question. We've been living across the street from people that have 7 cars. They don't park a single one of them in the driveway or in the garage. And that's gotten to be a real sticking point with my wife, to the point she wants to move after we've been there a couple of years. So, but with that said, I think this is the best use of this land. It matches the rest of the sub. Is the planning going to make them part of our HOA, or is that a question I could ask? Part of our HOA. Okay. And in 12 days, you have the parcel on county line there that's shown as single-family housing is coming in as 262 units for apartments. And that's going to change the whole parking of the area and everything else. So I think you really need to look at that overall for the parking and everything. But that's a major concern for the residents in that area. The safety, there's a right-in, right-out turn on the county line off of Sunshine. That is a real problem, real safety issue. Talking with Chris Huffer and everybody else at the city transportation, they claim that the new developers in the future are going to be paying to make that intersection in and out both directions, which it's not right now. And then I'm wondering if the Armstrong Road coming out to 17th is too close to county line to get proper distance there for safety and everything else. But, you know, I build roads every day of my life. I've worked with one of these gentlemen over the years, so, you know, I have faith in them, but just a concern for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boyers. Is there anybody else in the audience who'd like to come forward and speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Travis Aftermath, and live on 1291 Armstrong Drive, so same subdivision, Shadowgrass. And I would just want to repeat what he was mentioning with his concern with the turn on to Sunshine Avenue from East County Line Road. If you're traveling north on East County Line Road, there's a protected median, and there's a sign saying no left turn onto Sunshine. And as we continue to get more and more residents living in that area, the traffic congestion turning left onto 17th from East County Line, if you're going north, will just continue to increase. And I'll leave the studies up to the traffic board, but I could definitely see that, especially during rush hour, that could even bog down and even stop traffic on East County Line Road. And so just helping ease congestion and allowing residents to turn off into the subdivision from East County Line would be incredibly useful. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. There's only one other person in the audience who could possibly speak, but yeah, but you don't have to. So we'll close the public hearing section of this meeting. We'll go back to the commission. Don, I do have a question for you. Given some of the comments from our two speakers, I believe we covered a lot of these issues about the turn lanes and the traffic issues with the other project, with the apartment project, which came before us a while back. Am I correct about that? I think I am. I think I am. But...
Chairman Chernak, so I didn't quite follow your first.
Okay, so our two speakers from the public, mentioned that they're concerned about the traffic that will accumulate on County Line Road and with the right in, right out, and with the apartment complex that's going in, and traffic loads and delays, et cetera. But if memory serves correctly, we reviewed all of that when we were looking at the apartment complex project that had come before us previously, which Mr. Boyers referred to, that it's going to go into build phase soon.
Chairman Chernak, you're correct. I believe Ben brought forward the amendment to the comprehensive plan for this area, and I believe a concept plan amendment as well. As you can see in the left-hand side of the drawing that's on the screen right now, the corner, that is the northeast corner, was originally identified to be a mixed-use commercial center, for lack maybe of a better term. And then we were supposed to have the office buildings or apartments were allowed as you moved south into the next 2 blocks as you headed along county line, so those 2 that are being highlighted right now. And with the amendment that came before you for the north end, instead of letting apartments happen above retail, which is how they were originally permitted and approved, the change that was presented to the Planning Commission and ultimately approved by City Council was to amend the comprehensive plan and the concept plan for this project and allow for apartments to go in there, not over retail and any kind of mixed use, but just as a single use. So you heard information and concerns from the people that attended at that time. I believe Tyler Stamey from our traffic engineering department was here, was talking about some preliminary numbers. And as this develops, I don't remember the final outcome, but typically if we do not have a traffic study that is recent that would show us how this has now changed, because in a traffic study typically there are assumptions based on land uses, and if that traffic study has not been updated to now reflect either the as-built condition or what is now being proposed, then that study would need to be updated, and then they would review that and determine if there's any additional off-site improvements that would have to happen. That could entail, and I would expect, the widening of County Line Road, at least on the east side. The improvements to be put in there, whether that be removing some of the pork chops that are out there right now, that if you've driven out there at all, you've probably seen they've been beaten up over the last 12 plus years. But those would be improvements then that would be reviewed by Public Works based on that traffic study and would be updated. Now, any apartments that are going to be built on there, whether they're permitted, they would still have to come back through this body for a preliminary development plan application. So you would see that, and then you would evaluate that based on the information that was presented at that time for the preliminary development plan.
Right, so the folks who are here tonight asking about that traffic, they could go back to our minutes and even the video of our previous meeting. Do you happen to remember what the date of that might have been? You have a mind like a steel trap, but maybe not after 10 o'clock.
I can remember faces and I can remember a lot of things about the city of Longmont, but not dates, so sorry.
Karen?
Chairman Chernak, that land use amendment and concept plan amendment was approved was either December of 2015 or January of 2016.
Okay.
The other thing I would like to point out is the staff comments for this for review of Eastgate 6 included that at time of final approval of the final approval of the PUD development plan, that they would have to do improvements along County Line Road, specifically with the intersections and access in and out. So as part of the final approval for the PUD development plan and the public improvement plan will include those improvements. Just
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate that. Other questions, concerns, comments? Motions? I see people are starting to fade a little bit here. Commissioner Pullen.
Given the fact that the local people in the area seem to be in generally okay with this development, considering that it is compatible with the area around it, looking at it, the major concern in front of us, I guess, are the modifications that were requested, which was basically 40% of the same model and 20% of the same elevation, which I guess out of the 44 homes means about 9 could only be really the same home. I think that's okay for this development. Given that, I am in favor of this, and given that, I will move that we approve PZR 2016-23B with the conditions as stated by the Planning Department.
Yeah. Well, conditions to the in the PZR. I'll second that. So we have a second for a motion to approve PZR 2016-23B. I'll just like to put it in the record that I think the solution to this of having, as Commissioner Height was pointing out, so many variations, so many combinations possible given the paint colors and the different materials, and then varying the roof heights and varying the details, the architectural details on especially the front facades. It looks like you've got 40 some odd models, but you've really got, what was it, 3 different models? Or 7 different models, but you've got 40 combinations. It's a brilliant solution to this problem because I think, looking at all the sheets in our packet of how many different elevations we've got, it's not going to feel like there are similar houses there. It's going to feel like they're different. Now, personally, the paint colors, not my favorite, but that's not at issue here. Okay, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Well, I'd just like to say that I was initially under some trepidation just under the concept of only having a limited number of models, but considering that this is actually completely in conformity with the rest of the filings, generally speaking, I will be in support of the conditioned PZR.
Any other comments or thoughts? Let's take a vote. Okay, that passes unanimously 7-0. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, November 17 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, November 23rd at 5 p.m. Thank you to the applicants for your time. Karen, thank you very much for your 2 presentations tonight. Appreciate that. We will move on with our agenda here. Next item is our final call for the public invited to be heard. Jane, do we have any? No, nobody signed up. Anybody in the audience who would like to speak about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, we will close the public invited to be heard. Any items from the Commission? Seeing none, we will go to, well, our council representative is not here. Items from the principal planner, Don Burchett.
I had a raise there for a minute, but thank you. Just a couple things. One, I just wanted to say that I know that the firehouse project was, a challenge, but I think the commission, you guys always have a really good discussion, and I think it showed respect not only to the applicant but also to the people in the audience tonight. That I think they felt like it was a really good discussion and that it was well thought out. And so, whether the decision itself goes one way or the other, who knows? But I just want to say I thought that you guys always work really well together, and I appreciate that from being a staff member. I think Jane's maybe sent out an email about December PZ, maybe, or not. Okay. So a heads up is that it looks like we're going to move the December PZ, instead of it being on the 21st, which would be right before the week of Christmas. We're looking at moving that to the 14th of December. And right now, it looks like we will have 5 annexation referrals that you'll need, or annexations, concept plans that you'll need to review, and a preliminary PUD for a mining proposal. So it will be quite a night, and right now that is what is going on. The reason that these are all coming together is that these are all the same property owners with them, and so it's kind of a package, so to speak. So there'll be a lot. It'll probably most likely be a tag team presentation between Ava and myself, and then the applicant's consultant will also follow. So look forward to that nice email coming out, and a packet that'll probably have a lot in there for you to look at.
So, Don, when will you know for sure that the meeting's being moved? Can you notify us once?
Oh. So is it going to have to be the 21st then? Okay. So we'll work on that. Joni's back in on Friday, so we'll
Okay.
confirm that. I forgot about the traffic school. I forgot about that.
Okay, so if it happens on the 21st,
We need safer drivers in Longmont.
Yeah.
So let's work on that. So no traffic school.
Yeah. So if it happens on the 21st, I am out of town, and Commissioner Poland knows that as vice chair, but sounds like a good one to cut your teeth on. So, but if it moves to the 14th, I will be here. So, but just let us know.
Yeah, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Hopefully, if we can, we'd like to get this nailed down amongst ourselves Friday, because it affects all of our postings and notices. So we've got to know that going forward. So.
Okay. Did you have a concern, Commissioner Goldberg?
Whenever Don, when we have a more extensive agenda, do we ever consider starting an hour earlier? I'm not saying it's easy, but I feel like we've had study sessions before. Have we ever started an hour earlier? No.
I do not know of any, and I don't know if there's anything in the bylaws or anything like that we'd have to check. But we could look at that and then just let you know whether or not that's an option. Again, we normally wouldn't put this many on. Again, I think when you see them, because, for example, some of them are serial annexations, so it's the same property, but because of the size of it, we have to consider them as two separate applications. But in all intents and purposes, they are one annexation with one concept plan on the two parcels, but it would be listed separately as two projects.
So almost like if you approve one, you approve the other.
Yeah, or you
Almost.
can approve,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Domino effect. Yeah. Okay. And Dan Kramer, were you wanting to chime in on something?
Chair Shernick, I don't know what this says yet, but I'm going to read it to you. Regular meetings of the Planning and Zoning Commission shall be held in the Civic Center at 7 p.m. on the third Wednesday of each month. At meetings, calendars shall be prepared for review at the annual meeting. A regular meeting may be canceled or rescheduled by the commission at a prior meeting.
So we could make a motion now to give the Planning Services Director permission to reschedule next month's meeting an hour earlier if it were deemed beneficial.
Whoa, hold on.
Okay.
I hadn't gotten to the end. The Executive Secretary may change the starting time of the regularly scheduled monthly meetings if the amount of business on the Commission's agenda warrants such a change.
All right. Okay, Jane, we are at your mercy. So, okay.
If any change is made to the starting time of a commission meeting, the executive secretary shall notify the commission members of such change at least 5 days prior to the meeting.
Okay. All right, there we go.
Dan, does the date of according to what you just read, does the date of the meeting have to be announced today?
No.
Okay, I thought you said at a prior meeting.
At meetings.
Yeah, because December 14 is a non-standard meeting day for us, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, we're either the week of Christmas.
Right. Right. Well, we don't have a second. We don't have a.
There is not a second one.
Right.
A regular meeting may be canceled or rescheduled by the commission. I guess what you could do is you could add an alternate meeting date.
Okay, I make a motion that, what's that? Yeah. So I'll make a motion that if the Planning Services Director deems it necessary to add an alternate planning and zoning meeting on December 14, 2016, that the Commission approves the addition of the alternate meeting. Does that make sense?
Yes. I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Pollan. Okay. Let's just take a vote by acclamation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like it passed by. Anybody in not in favor? Okay. All right. Passes unanimously.
I'm not in favor. What was the stuff with the traffic school like? Are we going to?
Oh, it has nothing to do with us. It's staff. Yeah. So.
Well, this room is technically not available.
Right.
So.
So, Don, any further items? Okay, no further items. Anybody not in favor of adjournment? All right, we are adjourned.